All right, everybody. I think we're about ready to get started. It's 1:10. I think everybody who was looking for the links had a chance to get it. So let's get into this game. A really hard fought between the Stanford Cardinal and the Oregon State Beavers. Stanford ended up winning on a last-minute field goal after the Beavers clawed their way back to a pretty significant comeback in the second half. So in this video, we're going to see how Stanford was able to kind of score consistently throughout this game. I think they got a touchdown in every quarter. And then we're going to take a look at why Oregon State was really shut out for the first half of the game, but then came back with a pretty impressive 28 points, a bunch of consecutive scoring drives to close out this game and force Stanford to win it kind of at the buzzer, as it were. I'm just going to start off. We're going to go through this kind of chronologically. I think that the themes develop really nicely over the course of the game as we go. So we're just going to go through it kind of from start to finish. And I want to start out by pointing out on this play something that I thought really interesting, that I found really interesting in Stanford's offense, which is that they actually started this game doing something that's not super Stanford, at least traditionally. They started this game with a lot of RPOs. So what we're going to see right here is this is going to be a run set up to the right. This is Stanford opening the game on 2nd and 8. I believe this is their second play of the game. And here we see this little bunch formation up here at the top of the screen. We're going to see them run a zone action away from that bunch. And then their quarterback's just going to read Oregon State's defenders in the box, pull the ball, and throw a screen for a little very 2020 RPO style play right here. So let's check that out. A little bit more spread than you're used to seeing from Stanford, just throwing that little smoke screen right there. Picking up a nice gain on 2nd and 8. So that's how Stanford's coming out. They're coming out going spread. They're coming out throwing the ball on these RPOs, which they've been one of the slowest teams in the conference to actually get on this train. And they didn't do it throughout this game, but here at the beginning of the game, they started to show it to Oregon State. We can kind of understand why here. Oregon State is a defense likes to play a lot of quarters. That's not going to be a huge theme throughout this video, but it is something that they like to do in a lot of different games. And so we can kind of understand why Stanford might go a little bit counter character here and throw an RPO if we just look at the way that this quarter's alignment sets up. So the 4 deep defenders in the quarters here are this cornerback, these 2 safeties, and then the cornerback up here at the top of the screen. And so all that's going on here is that when Oregon State's playing with this kind of 4 deep shell, then they only have so many resources that they can devote to the combination of stopping the run and throwing the screen. And so all that's happening here is that Stanford's quarterback is reading this. I believe that's a linebacker right here. He's seeing that guy's lined up way inside the hash. He knows that he's got this screen going on out here. And so at this point, it's really just a matter of angles and distance. He knows that this linebacker isn't going to be able to get all the way out to a screen to this guy down the sidelines. So Stanford's counting on these 2 receivers to block the nickel back and the cornerback, and they know that they've got this nice 3-over-2 matchup up here at the top of the screen. So let's just check that out one more time. Put it in slow motion here. So as we see, when the ball's caught, there's that linebacker. He's only just getting to the hash. Stanford's got their blockers working out to those 2 defensive backs that I talk about, and they're able to get down the field. So even Stanford has started to recognize the value of these RPOs. They've started to incorporate into their offense. They don't try to set it up in the same way that a lot of hardcore spread teams will, but if you're going to show them this kind of shell, then they're going to use these RPOs to control guys like this linebacker in order to force them to decide, am I either going to play in the box or am I going to widen out against the screen? So there we go. That's our first breakdown of the game. Can everybody hear me? Is everything okay? Is the video showing up all right? Oh, man. Perfect. Thank you, thank you. My internet just cut out a little bit, but we're ready to go for the next one. Hey, have you ever been in here before, David? Is this your first time in the chat? I see some familiar faces in the chat list. Nice, cool, good to see you. All right, let's go on to the next player that I pulled, which is 1346. Here we go. All right, so this is the other side of that RPO play, right? This is kind of I believe that what I've pulled here Yeah, this is going to be kind of the other side of Stanford's run game here. So we've seen the RPO on the previous play. Something else that really both teams did a lot more than kind of a traditional spread style RPO attack, although that was there for both teams, is just lining up with two tight ends, usually set into the short side of the field like this. Use those guys to create extra gaps to run the ball. Here, Stanford is augmenting that two tight end formation by taking the receiver that you would tend to think would be lined up on that side and pulling him out into a slot alignment. So this is just one of the receivers Stanford has here at the bottom of the screen. They've got another one that we can't see off the screen. And so here they're just running another RPO. They're combining it with their two tight end run game. So they're going to run toward those two tight ends, and they're going to release this slot receiver on a bubble screen to the outside. So we can kind of see that action right here. Stanford continuing to incorporate that RPO game into their two tight end rushing attack. I'll put this in slow motion. So here we go. We see that wide receiver releasing outside. And remember that kind of the point of this was to control this linebacker and force him to decide, am I going to be a box player against the run, or am I going to widen against the screen? In this case, we see that that guy is sitting out wide. He's not coming into the box very aggressively. That's going to tell this quarterback to hand off. Another reason he probably doesn't want to throw this screen here is he sees that Oregon State's rotating this safety down to attack that screen. So there are a variety of reasons that he's going to hand off here, but this is just the run counterpart to these RPOs. You know, when this linebacker doesn't come down into the box very aggressively, that opens up this lane that we can see right here, and that allows the quarterback to hand it off. You know, nothing spectacular here, but that's still 6 yards on 1st and 10. That's a perfectly acceptable play on 1st down. So it's really interesting to me to see Stanford going with this so heavy off the top. I know Hidladay's broken down a ton of film on this. I in the games that I've watched, I haven't seen Stanford running this very much. You might have seen a little bit more of it, but I thought that this was a really interesting way for them to start the game. And as a reminder, there is about a 20-second lag between what I say on video and when you hear it. So if you type a question into chat, I'll keep an eye on it and try to get back to everything in a timely fashion. But just be aware that there is a little bit of lag. Okay, while I wait to see if there are any questions or comments in the chat, let's just check out this issue, which is going to be one problem. I'm not going to dwell on this in this breakdown, but one problem that did pop up at a couple of critical times is that Stanford's offensive line did have some problem with protection. Stanford's offensive line has been kind of, we'll say, a developing unit over the last couple of years. They haven't had the same kind of domination that they had during their classic run, where they had all those years going to bowl games. And so here we can see what it looks like a little bit. The RPO aspect is new to 2019. The fact that Stanford only got 100 yards rushing is not new. Yeah, their offensive line, if you go back a few years, Bryce Love was still able to put up huge rushing numbers, but I did some breakdowns for that on my Patreon site, kind of looking at what was going on, because there was this weird thing where Love was gaining like massive yards per carry, and all of the running backs were all the other running backs were hardly gaining anything. And if you look at those games from Love's last big season, their offensive line wasn't opening that much for him. A lot of that was Love just being Love and being a really good running back. And the second that he left, the weaknesses in their offensive line really got exposed. And maybe they're going to these RPOs as a way to try to cover that up. I think at this point it's been enough years and they've cycled through enough guys that it really has to be the development aspect in terms of their position play there. We'll see right now. Let's watch this play that I've got pulled up here, and we can see kind of some of the issues. And by development, I mean both the physical side of things and technique and things like that. They're just not as dominating or even as strong. I don't know if there's a strength and conditioning issue going on, but also just in terms of picking up assignments and things like that. Here, we're going to see this left tackle up at the top of the screen who's just going to, I believe this guy just declared, if I'm not mistaken. Bryce Love was so good. I was a Cal fan, like, we're ready for him to leave, but when you actually break down the film and you see what he was contributing to that offense, independent of what else was going on around him, that guy was incredible. Really, really impressive running back to watch, even if he is a Stanford player. So here we're going to be watching this left tackle, and we're going to see kind of the evidence of like that kind of technique and execution issue that Stanford's had trouble with really the last couple of years. So we've got this outside linebacker lined up over that left tackle. Love and McCaffrey could exactly. Yeah, and the offensive line was a lot better when McCaffrey was there, although McCaffrey added so much, especially in the passing game. But by the end of Love's career, they just weren't doing a lot for him. So once again, left tackle on that outside linebacker. I'm glad to hear it confirmed that the RPO element was totally new in 2019 because I really hadn't seen it that much. So there it is. There's the sack. I think if there wouldn't have been a sack, then they probably could have gotten this left tackle for a hold as well. And there, that guy's just kind of getting him around the edge. This isn't like we've seen some sacks given up where the left tackle oversets or something like that, and the edge rusher is able to come down inside of him. Here, that guy's just getting beat off the edge here. You know, the outside linebacker has done a good job of kind of getting his hands mostly off of him, at least to the point where he can kind of get around him. And we see that left tackle's got to grab onto him and hold him. There he does kind of a little Olay so as not to draw a holding penalty. But that doesn't stop that outside linebacker any from getting around and making that sack. But isn't this sack on Mills not thrown to the... Yeah, so there are definitely always... There's the passing game component and the, as you say, and also then the actual concept itself. So let's take a look at that and see what Hithloday is talking about here. So we've got a 3-4 front, and what's going on with the coverage. Interesting. That's Hamilcar. Yeah, by the way, Hamilcar is a pretty fantastic name for an outside linebacker for anyone who's interested in their like ancient Carthaginian history. But yeah, I mean, you can see, you know, that left tackle is not a bad player. You'd still like to see a guy who's kind of declaring and going into the draft to maybe be a little bit more dominant on the edge, but that outside linebacker is a pretty good player as well, as Hithloday is pointing out. So the question is, how much of this sack is on Mills not throwing to this slot receiver right here? Pre-snap, I think he's looking up at this safety. He's seeing the outside leverage of that safety. That guy's running an out right here. And yeah, I mean, I think he's reading this guy as not being open. And I think if he would have thrown this ball, there's a very good chance that defensive back could have broken on it and gotten the pass breakup. Maybe he should have taken a shot at it. An incompletion obviously would have been a lot better than taking the sack. But you can kind of see what he's seeing right here. I think this is ultimately a bad play call by the offensive coordinator. Getting back to... Oh, that's Rouse Little was injured. Oh, okay, awesome. Thank you for that heads up. I wondered what was going on there. I thought that was pretty bizarre. Okay, but going back to California Love's question, you know, how much of some of these struggles are related to scheme and things like that. The fact that this is the best read for Mills right here, when we see this guy, he's got outside leverage. He's all ready to break. They've got a safety rotating the deep middle, so he's able to play all over that. There's really this, if that's his primary read, you know, maybe he's got this check down with two linebackers sitting over the top of it. On 2nd and 7, Stanford really hasn't created a leverage advantage for any of those wide receivers. You know, maybe the curl up here actually would have ended up being the best option, although we do have this floating linebacker. I just think that there's another component of this sack is that the play call itself doesn't give him a lot of good quick options. And the fastest option that's going to let him avoid that sack is really kind of taken away by leverage and that safeties technique. So, there we go. So that's kind of Stanford's struggles early, although they are going to score consistently throughout this game. So we're gonna see their offense doing some of their classic nice things, but right out the gate they struggled a little bit, and those issues that we just talked about are some of the themes that are going to come up throughout. Let's move over to look at Oregon State now. By the way, you know, even as I'm moving on, feel free to ask questions in chat. It's easy enough to go back and look at stuff again if you get something in that kind of lagging period. Okay, so on this play, this is something that that's the wrong play. Here we go. Okay, here we're going to talk a little bit about how Stanford plays in coverage and about the precise way that they're scheming up their against the passing game, and something that Oregon State was able to do really effectively to stop them. So what we're seeing right here is that Oregon State did a nice job of mixing and matching their personnel. So sometimes they're going to play a lot of, you know, run game oriented around 2 tight ends. Other times they're going to split out 4 receiving threats wide and spread the field as they do right here. So anytime that you spread the field and go 4 wide like this, the threat is that you can run 4 verticals. That's the thing that any modern defense has to be concerned about, especially especially when you only have a single safety in the deep middle of the field here. So Stanford likes to play a lot of cover 3. And if you're going to have 3 deep defenders and the offense has the potential to get 4 guys vertical, then that's obviously going to be your number one concern. And so how do you address that? Well, the way that Stanford's addressing that is, even though this is technically cover 3, even though these cornerbacks and this free safety are technically the 3 deep defenders, they're just going to ask these slot defenders to carry anything down the seam. So if a route doesn't go down the seam, this can end up basically looking like a normal cover 3 with 3 deep defenders and these 4 guys underneath. But if the inside receivers go vertical, then you've got that threat of 4 verts. And so that's why you might ask these slot defenders to carry those guys if they run vertical. Only if they run vertical, it kind of mans up a little bit. So what Oregon State was able to do is they were able to use this very effectively against Stanford, not to throw those 4 vertical routes, not to attack down the seams and try to outnumber Stanford's 3 deep coverage, but really what they want to do is they're going to use this inside receiving threat to run off this defender. Remember, if this defender has to carry the seam, that means that we can get rid of him. And in that case, if you can eliminate this defender with a vertical route, then what you're really doing is isolating this off cornerback against this outside receiving threat in the quick game. So we're going to see a good look at that right here. We'll show this in slow motion. Okay, so here we go. We see vertical releases up here at the top of the screen. We know that this guy's going to have to carry his receiver on anything vertical to mitigate that 4 verts threat. Okay, so there it goes. We see this guy is running either a slot fade or a corner route, and that his defender has to carry him. So that pulls him deep. And what that means is that there's not an underneath zone defender who can maybe get to this throw outside in the flat. It's going to be all on the cornerback to come down from his technically deep outside third assignment in order to take away this short route in the flat. And so Oregon State did a really nice job of using their passing concepts to manipulate these slot defenders and open up these little isolations against the cornerbacks on the outside. And this is not this exact play, but this kind of attack is something that they did a really good job of throughout the game. And we'll see that once they start scoring, this is something that came up in a lot of different ways. Let's see. Okay, so there's a question that we might come up with at the half. So once again, if Stanford has to use these slot defenders to carry potential verticals by the slot receivers in order to prevent this free safety from getting outnumbered. But what that means is that Oregon State's able to get rid of those defenders just by running them off deep, opening up these isolations for these outside receivers on this quick game stuff underneath these off cornerbacks who are technically deep outside third defenders. A really smart way to get some kind of ball control, quick passing game offense going. All right, let's check out 7:42 in the first. We're still developing these key matchups that we're going to see throughout the game. And on this one, we're going to see Oregon State just running an RPO with their own. I was a lot more impressed with OSU's offense schematically in the first half than Stanford's. I would agree. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about why Oregon State bogged down and what caused problems for them. But if you look at why they were shut out in the first half, did they have 2 missed field goals? I think there were a total of 3 missed field goals in the first half. Let me double check. I think Oregon State missed 2 field goals. Yeah, they did. So they moved the ball. They gained a ton of yards. I think it's fair to say that their offense was pretty impressive schematically, and we're definitely going to see examples of that. And then what happened in the second half is just they stopped kind of getting those either negative plays or those missed chances for points that were bogging them down in the first half. But between the 20s, they were moving the ball like crazy in the first half. I'd agree. I mean, I really like this Jonathan Smith offense. It's not a crazy wide open spread. He's not, Rich Rodriguez, or Mike Leach or anyone like that. There are spread elements that are used kind of tastefully. There are also a lot of pro style elements that are in there. And it's just good play calling and game planning. There's nothing particularly new or strange about it. It's just good football coaching, in my opinion. Much more so than on the defense. I think that the offense is where they're definitely at their most impressive. So here is Oregon State running one of those RPO elements of their own. So what we're going to see a lot like with the Stanford play is they're setting up a zone run, I believe, to the right. So the running back's going to be heading toward the tight end. This is a tight zone play up here at the top of the screen. And once again, remember, these RPOs are all about trying to control these linebackers in the box, trying to force them. Yeah, Smith is the best plus value coach in the Pac-12. He's definitely up there. I think that'd be an interesting debate or discussion. That might be something at the end of all of this, once we've broken down a bunch of different teams, really diving into it and trying to come up with a ranking or something could be a lot of fun. So coming back to this play, this RPO, remember the whole point of running passing routes to these receivers who are split out wide is to control these linebackers, force them to choose, are you going to be a box player against the run, or are you going to be a pass defender out here? Here, it's obvious that Stanford's linebackers have stayed in the box. They're gearing up to stop the run. They know Oregon State's got this tight end up here, so there are 6 blockers. So they're really loading up here with 7 box defenders to take away the run part of this play. And we're going to see why they really needed to do that on some other nice runs by Oregon State. But what that does is when this linebacker can't drop out in coverage, when he can't get out to the hash, that isolates this defender against this slot receiver who's going to end up catching this right here. Sorry, I messed with the speed there. So there it is. We can see what Stanford's trying to do. What is a plus value coach? Do you want to define that, Hitherday, or do you want me to talk about it? I mean, I guess I can because I'm the one who doesn't have to deal with the lag. So when we're talking about a plus value coach, all that we really mean is how much value does the coach add above and beyond, say, the talent of his players, or the resources of his program. What does his specific talent or ability with Oh, okay, Hitherday already kind of addressed it. Given the talent resources of his team, which coach adds? There we go. That's it. Great answer. By the way, Hitherday writes it, addicted to Quack. He's a Ducks blogger, but we like hanging out and talking about scheme, and we read a lot of each other's stuff. So definitely, if you like this kind of thing, find both of us on Twitter or whatever. That's probably where you saw me, actually. So, okay. I want to point out something cool that Stanford's doing to try to deal with these RPOs, because it's obvious here, these linebackers aren't even pretending to be pass defenders. So they know Oregon State loves to RPO. They're not hiding what they're doing. They're in the box, they're box defenders. They want those guys to be in a position where they can just defend run. Okay. Now, if you're Stanford, then you know that that's going to cause problems for you in the passing game, that you know that that's going to create isolations for you out here. And so what they're trying to do throughout this game is play with a slight inside shade of these defenders, especially the ones lined up over the slot receivers, because they want to play slightly inside those guys so that if they run something like a slant that attacks the space that these linebackers are vacating, then they want this guy playing inside so that he can drive on those routes and break them up. So this is how Stanford's trying to deal with the RPO element. They're leaving the linebackers in the box and playing this guy inside. And I forget if I pulled a play where this guy gets a nice pass breakup, but there were plays where this was very effective for them. This is a little bit counter to what Stanford would normally be doing in a single high coverage like this. In this coverage, Stanford probably has a safety in the middle of the field. Normally, you'd want that slot defender to play outside of his receiver so that he could force him inside to the linebackers and the safety in the middle. But when you know that you want these linebackers to be run-first defenders, when you know you can't get any help from them, then Stanford's got to change up this leverage assignment with this guy a little bit so that he can drive on something like a slant that tries to attack on the backside of these RPOs. So a really nice little kind of sophisticated back and forth schematically there. This is something that Stanford will do to adjust that other teams won't necessarily. A lot of teams will just play this guy outside, play a classic single high coverage, and concede those slants, recognizing that if they need to take them away, they'll have to call a different coverage. But Stanford will make these little modifications to their coverage and change up their leverage so that they can take away these RPOs without having to radically change their play call. So that's a little bit sophisticated element there to their defense. Although, in the same way we talked about their offensive line coaching, I think that their defensive coaching and scheme has taken huge step backs over the tenure of this most recent defensive coordinator, and we'll see some serious problems with their scheme in later plays. But there's Oregon State working that RPO element. Let's go to 6:43 in the first to see another topic. Okay, so here we go. I mentioned that Oregon State, Stanford wanted to free up these linebackers to be dedicated run defenders against the RPO. We're going to see a good example of that right here, where Oregon State is going to start to establish the run in a pretty significant way. Okay, so what's happening here is Stanford, something that they do in all of their games, this is a feature of their defense, is that they like to pretend like you don't know what this outside linebacker up at the top of the screen's doing. By the way, if you're watching football and you see what's called a 2-on-1 alignment, meaning we got one slot receiver, and if we go back further, we've got one slot receiver, and then you've got both a linebacker and a safety over the top. Almost 100% of the time, that means that this guy's blitzing. So it's not even really a disguise if you watch any tape. This is the kind of alignment that's weird enough. Sometimes Stanford will bail out of it because they know what their tendencies are too. But if you see two guys playing over one receiver in this kind of weird stacked alignment, it almost always means that there's a blitz coming. So that's a little thing to kind of boost your football viewership IQ, I guess. So what Stanford's doing is, remember, they want to take away the run on these RPOs. They want to discourage inside breaking throws on the RPO. And so that's why they've walked this guy out. But in order to make sure they can take away the run, they're going to bring this guy into the box, because right now Oregon State's got this H-back here. They've got 6 blockers. And so Stanford wants to bring this guy into the box as a 7th run defender to take away the run here. They're only walking him out to try and discourage something like a slant to this slot receiver here. But we're going to see it's really not going to matter, because when this guy's lined up so far outside of the box, what Oregon State's going to want to do is they're going to want to run. I believe they're running away from him on this particular play, although they do mix it up. No, they're running toward him. They'll run away from him on some other plays. And so what Oregon State's going to do is they're just going to use this H-back to kick out that 7th defender. Nickel blitzed a lot, and Luton missed it. I forget if I pulled that play, but I know exactly the one that you're talking about, where Luton was not able to pick up on these. Now, Stanford did some similar stuff against USC, and USC absolutely torched them when they tried to jump around these defenders out here. We'll see some interesting play. I'm going to see if I pulled that one that you're talking about, because I know exactly what play you mean. Okay. So let's check out the scheme here. So we know that Stanford's bringing this, I guess that's probably a nickel Sam, maybe. He's in the 3-4 outside linebacker alignment, but that's probably a nickel back. So they're bringing him as the 7th defender off the edge. And what this H-back is going to allow them to do is, when this H-back lines up in the backfield, he's going to give Oregon State a guy to kick out that defender. And what this is going to allow Oregon State to do against Stanford's 3-4 front is they're just going to double team these down linemen all day. So when they don't need an offensive lineman to block this guy, they're going to use their right guard and right tackle to double the defensive end. They're going to use their center and left guard to double the nose tackle. And they were able to get a ton of movement out of those double teams on plays just like this. So let me get that going. Okay, so here we see it. There's the H-back kicking out that blitzer. Here's the double team on the end. Here's the double team on the nose tackle. And what that does, that creates a ton of lateral movement. So here, look at where the running back is. The running back's in the middle of the field. If we go back and look at where the middle of the field is pre-snap, the middle of the field would be all the way out here. Okay, but as this play develops and they're able to use those double teams to get movement on Stanford's defensive line, right, the line really shifts. So now it's a point where the running back, by cutting downhill in the middle of the field, he's actually cutting it almost all the way back inside of the left tackle here. So all that movement is just a huge deal for opening up these cutback lanes. And Oregon State's going to end up using them a good amount. Here it's only a 5-yard gain because we're establishing the schematic theme. But in later plays, we're going to see in the second half, Oregon State was ripping off massive runs. And a lot of it is from getting these double teams and establishing this flow on zone plays. But once again, the key here is that using this H-back to account for this nickel back out here on the edge, because that's the thing that frees up the right tackle to double team with the guard. Once we can get a double team there, then we can get a double team on the nose with the center and the left guard. So using this extra blocker and the way that they're doing to account for this guy that Stanford wants to kind of jump into and out of the box is really the thing that makes this play kind of go. We'll watch it one more time just to see the movement laterally. And when the defensive line moves that much, look at how the linebackers have to flow with it too. So both of those inside linebackers are also running. So the whole front is really shifted over. That opens up that cutback lane. Here it's only 5 yards, but it'll be more later. Nice. Let's see. Let's check out what caused this play to bog down, to kind of die out. So here we have a 2nd and 5. And here we're going to see the benefit of Stanford's blitzing these defensive backs off the edge. Ever think you'd see an Oregon State? Not 3 years ago, but over the last couple of years, I would have said, yeah. I did a whole write-up on my Patreon about when Jamar Jefferson really exploded onto the scene, and he had that really big year as a true freshman. Everybody was talking about how awesome he was. When you go back and watch that tape, Oregon State's offensive line's just been developed incredibly well. They're really good at kind of working these combo blocks and establishing these double teams. So yeah, I mean, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, this would have seemed impossible, but they've done a good job of coaching those guys up. And in 2019, that's kind of the apex of it. It's crazy. And when you can get those double teams, it gets really easy to dominate. So that's where the schematic element comes in. There was the question earlier, is it scheme, is it coaching? Well, it's easy to move guys. Well, not easy, but it's a lot easier to move guys when you can get two blockers on them. So that kind of use of the H-back is a huge part of this as well. So once again, we see this slot receiver out here. Now, I've taught those of you who weren't already familiar with this, when you see a 2-on-1 alignment like this, almost a sure thing that you're going to see this nickelback blitzing off the edge. And the key here is how this is going to screw up Oregon State's protection. I believe that's what we're going to see here, if I'm remembering this play correctly. Yeah, there it is. Or not protection, it's their run blocking scheme, but it works kind of in a similar way. So what's ultimately going to happen here is the running back, this play is working to the right again. So we see Oregon State's trying to establish that same flow to the right. This time Stanford's not in a 3-4. So they've got this extra defensive lineman at the first level because they're trying to eliminate some of those double teams that Oregon State was creating. So Stanford's made a nice front adjustment in comparison to the play that we just saw, and they're running toward this tight end up here at the top of the screen. And we know that when we see this 2-on-1 alignment out here, there's a very good chance that this guy's blitzing. And so remember that on the last play, Oregon State was able to establish flow in one direction, and then the running back was able to cut up to the backside. And so on this play, we're going to see how bringing this here running away from the blitz, the presence of this blitzer on the edge is going to be the thing that allows Stanford to take away this cutback. So what we want to watch is we actually want to watch the matchup of this defensive end against the guy that's blocking him right here, this left tackle on the edge. So that's the matchup that we really want to focus on. And what's happening here is that when Stanford brings this defensive back as an extra rusher off the edge, what that means is that this defensive end no longer has to contain on the outside. So the fact that this blitz is coming is going to let this guy stab down inside of his left tackle. So let's see that right here. Okay, so the left tackle is trying to fire out and cut him off from pursuing this play, trying to open up a cutback lane. But because Stanford's got that blitzer, this defensive end is going to be able to stunt down inside of that left tackle. Right, so he sheds that guy really easily. Now, all of a sudden, remember the running back on the previous play wanted to cut back as the Beavers were able to establish flow to the right. The running back cut back to the left. But now when that left tackle gets slipped by this defensive end, who's only able to come down inside of him because of the presence of this blitzer on the edge, that's the thing that takes away the cutback. Plus, there's just Stanford's defensive front's doing a nice job. Their nose tackle is also getting penetration into the backfield. So it's not just about the scheme here, although the scheme would have taken away the cutback either way. So I believe that this guy's also getting some nice penetration, which messes up the running. Yeah, he's kind of beating that left guard down inside and forcing the running back to cut back to where we've now got that unblocked defensive end and that blitzer coming off the edge to make the tackle. So good execution by Stanford, a nice schematic call against this run working toward the tight end away from this blitzer. Nice adjustments there to cause this play to bog down. One more time. Yeah, and when you can force the cutback, however you're able to do it, that does start to make everything work a lot better for the defense. So let's check out right here. So Oregon State's manning up the backside of this zone play, so the tackle's firing out for the end, which means that the right guard is singled up on this nose tackle on this defensive tackle who ends up beating him. And the other thing that happens is when you man up on the backside like this, remember Stanford's playing a 4-man line, so they have an extra first-level defender. So when you're at one-on-one on the backside like this, that means neither of these linemen will be able to get up to this backside linebacker. And so he's actually going to get here as well, right? Neither of those guys is able to get up to him. The center's trying to cut him off, but he's got a bad angle for it. And so Stanford ends up with the blitzer, the stunting defensive end who beat the tackle down inside, and this weak side linebacker that they don't have a blocker for. And they're all there to take away the cutback in combination with this nose tackle who's beat the left guard down inside to get the first penetration and mess the play up from that standpoint. So good play from Stanford that kind of shut down this drive with a big tackle for loss. And this led to another one, Oregon State's missed field goals. I'm going to go grab a charger for my second monitor before I move on to the next drive. I'll be back in 30 seconds. Feel free to put any questions in the chat while I'm gone. All right, we're back. I got the chat up on another computer, which is about to die, so. All right, so there we go. We've started to see some of the major themes of this game. So now let's take a look at some scoring drives. We're going to go now to the end of the first quarter where Stanford gets their first touchdown. Like clockwork, they scored a touchdown once a quarter. And then they also kicked a field goal at the end to win it. So let's take a look at some stuff that Stanford liked to do in this game as they attacked Oregon State's coverage. Here we're going to see a completion to this outside receiver up here at the top of the screen. Just a sec. All right, so the passing concept that we're interested in is coming from these two receivers up here at the top. So let's check that out. All right, so that's what they're doing. Let's talk about how they opened that up and how that worked well against what Oregon State's trying to do on this play. So Stanford here, they're trying to get a little bit clever with their formation. They are getting a little bit clever with their formation. Obviously, it leads to a nice completion. What they're doing is they're using a compressed split by these two receivers. In these live casts, we've seen compressed splits like this used to do a bunch of different things. Here, what Stanford's doing is they're releasing this inside receiver out on almost like on a little outside releasing hitch. So let's check that out right here. All right, so he's just going to hitch up here underneath, and then they're bringing the outside receiver on a slant over the top of him. Okay, so that's kind of the concept. We get a little switch where the inside receiver releases outside on a hitch, and the outside receiver comes back inside on a slant. And when I talk about Stanford getting a little bit clever with their formation, what I mean is that they're using this compressed split. And so the reason that you do that, you always do that because you've seen on tape how the defense defends compressed splits. When you go into a compressed formation like this, the defense is worried about picks. They're worrying about all these things that you can do when you put two receivers that close together. Every defense has its own way that it likes to deal with those threats. And here what Oregon State's doing is they're pressing the guy that's on the line, or kind of soft pressing, and then they're playing with their cornerback outside and over the top. So remember, if these guys are going to run a pick, that if one guy's going to go outside and one guy's going to go inside, then Oregon State kind of wants to be able to create a bracket on. They want to use this guy to press and disrupt the timing of any kind of pick that Stanford might be trying to run. And then they've got this cornerback playing outside and over the top so that if there is a pick or some kind of crossing action and a receiver goes outside, he'll be in position to drive on that because there's no other defender that we can't see up here at the top of the screen. These two guys are kind of all responsible for these two receivers. And where that makes Oregon State really vulnerable, you've got the press down here, and you've got a cornerback playing outside, you can kind of see where this void is going to develop to the inside, and that's what they end up exploiting. So Stanford's just using this guy on the line to kind of run off this press defender in a little bit. When he runs a hitch, that guy has to go with him, and then that exposes this cornerback with his outside shade to the inside breaking slant by the outside receiver. So let's check that out right here. Stanford ran this concept maybe about 5 times in this game. I didn't count it, but this is one of the best examples of it. Right, so that press defender gets taken away by the hitch. Cornerback's in kind of a tough spot when that slant breaks back inside. Really nice two-man game going on right there. Okay, cool. Let's check out another play from this scoring drive. So something that Stanford's really become known for over the last few years, and that continued. It was at its best in 2018, but in 2019, the trend, it was still one of the best things they did, and that's just their big physical wide receiver talent going up against secondaries who aren't really able to handle them. We're going to see some really big examples of that on another drive, but here we can see something that popped up a few times for Oregon State, not just in this game, but in several games over the last few years, and it's that even when their defenders have leverage, they don't necessarily have the talent, ability, or execution to take advantage of what the scheme is giving them. So we can see a good example of that right here. We're going to keep an eye on this safety, and we can see the way that Oregon State's trying to defend this slot receiver. They've got a linebacker, I believe, shaded inside of him, and then they've got this safety playing over the top and outside. So they've got this kind of high, low, inside, outside bracket on this slot receiver. The slot receiver is going to run a sail route, so he's going to release vertical and then break out to the sidelines. The outside leverage of this defender, of this safety, should put him in a perfect position to take that away. because we see he doesn't have much inside help. There's a cornerback down here, but he's going to get run off by the outside receiver. So that safety is in a really good position to take away this play, but he's just going to get pushed too far vertical. He's not really confident to stay on that receiver tightly. So he lets that receiver push him vertical, and then that opens things up for that receiver to break out toward the sidelines. So this is just a play of Stanford having kind of better wide receiver talent than Oregon State has talent in the secondary, because this guy should not be giving up a vertical outside route from this alignment. It just shouldn't happen. The scheme's putting him exactly in position to take away this kind of thing, but he's getting beat anyway. So there, once again, that might be a great game plan by Stanford. If you're Stanford and you know that this safety can't cover that route, then call it all game no matter what. But here, when we talk about plus coaching, the X's and O's of this play, meaning the actual alignments and the routes that these receivers are running, that's not what opens this up. What opens this up is the matchup between this wide receiver and this safety over the top. So it's kind of a matchup. It's a good matchup call, but not really a good pure X's and O's on the chalkboard call. Not that doesn't mean you shouldn't call it. But it's just Mills concept, right? Appropriate for this quarterback. Nice. Yeah, exactly. A lot of teams will run this kind of so basically what we're talking about here is a deep route by the outside receiver to run off the cornerback, and then some kind of deep sail from that slot receiver. Pushing that safety too deep. Oregon State has a lot of trouble with their talent and execution in the secondary against a lot of teams, both this year and last year. Okay, let's check out one more thing. A really nice play call from Stanford at 1:48 in the first. So here's how they get their first touchdown. This is going to be kind of another thing where it's interesting to talk about the formation. So here's Stanford. We see them lined up in their two tight end formations, which we know they love. That's their calling card. And so they're lining up with three receiving threats ultimately to the left. They've got a wide receiver split out wide and two tight ends lined up at the top of the screen. So let's see exactly how this develops. There's a play action fake. Okay, we know that Stanford, we saw, for example, an RPO where Stanford ran toward two tight ends away from some kind of pass component on the backside. So here they might almost be setting that up a little bit. This isn't an RPO though. This is just a called screen. So we're going to see a play action fake to the left. Let's run that forward and just see how that goes. We're going to see Oregon State doing a nice job. If this were a run, they flow fast to it. So it's not a nice job on this play because they haven't quite read the key correctly. But they're just running this play action fake to the left and then throwing a tunnel screen back to the right side. And I'm going to show something else about this, but there are actually a lot of things to say about the scheme here. But that's the basic development of this play. Run to the left, throwback screen to the right, and that guy is pretty much untouched into the end zone. So let's talk about why he was untouched into the end zone. Stanford is doing something that's classic Stanford. Whether you're doing play action, whether you're throwing a screen, the best way, what are they thinking defensively? An 8-man box and no help to the boundary. Is this a schematic error? Did the backer mess up? So let's see. So ultimately, Oregon State's just playing single high, and we can talk about their coverage structure here. I'm going to watch the cornerback and see what he does. So partially, it's a schematic slip up to the extent that they're playing a single high coverage. Anytime that you see a tunnel screen go for huge yardage, you can almost guarantee that it's going to be against some kind of single high coverage. Just the basic math of this, and people who are on my Patreon are probably getting sick of this kind of thing, but the basic math of this is that, when you put a safety to each side of the field, that safety becomes an extra player who can take away things like screens or let you outnumber the offense to each side. When you play with a single high safety in the middle of the field instead of with a safety to each side, then you don't have any extra defender over the top. And so, this is really just a cover 3 shell, right? Cover 3 to play an 8-man box against a 2 tight end run heavy formation. That's not unreasonable. That's how a lot of teams are going to defend Stanford's run game. But the problem with that, and the reason that screens can be so successful against this, is because the numbers just don't work out very well so let's look at the actual scheme. So in terms of numbers, we got the cornerback matching this wide receiver. So they're kind of one-on-one, right? So if the quarterback were to throw out to this receiver, then the cornerback could be a man to take him out because there are even numbers. The thing that these schemes can do so effectively, and the reason that they work, is because they start to get these offensive linemen releasing. So here Stanford's using play action to get the defense flowing with the run action. And then what they're doing is they're using the offensive line to introduce an extra number to this side. So here we see this lineman. Remember, the cornerback and the receiver were even before the snap, but when you can sneak this offensive lineman out here, he blocks that cornerback, and then there's nobody over the top. Actually, I think Oregon State's rolling out of cover 3 into something different, which is a part of it. But once again, I mean, even if this guy were in the middle of the field, there's a blocker for him. So just again to recap, since I went on that kind of little tangent there, there is a one-on-one matchup out here. What this screen does is it uses the offensive line to introduce an extra number out here. Because there's not a safety over the top to this side, the defense doesn't have that extra defender to match. And so a lot of the time, if you play with only a single safety high, then you can get these huge explosive screen plays against this kind of defense. Let's talk a little bit more about that kind of question. So the 8-man box, no help to the boundary. So the way that this should be working, and the reason that the play action element here, or the run action element, is so effective here. So let's talk about that help to the boundary. So I mentioned that it looked like Oregon State was in cover 3. That's what they're showing pre-snap. If we watch this guy post-snap, it looks like he's actually bailing out. So he's probably playing a deep half over here with this cornerback playing in the flat so that they can get a bracket on this receiver right here. So they're kind of trying to create that cover 2 shell over the top of this receiver at the top of the screen. And so, yeah, why isn't there any help over here over this guy? Well, what you would do, the way that this coverage would work if this were a straight drop back passing play, is that we get this safety rotating. He'd become the defender with the cornerback in the flat. And then thinking back to our BYU live cast, we saw the coverage that I called buzz. So remember that in buzz, the cornerback dropped deep as like kind of a deep half player, or like an outside third player for, playing from an inside shade or something like that. So in buzz, the cornerback here would be the deep defender, and then this linebacker would drop out to be the defender in the flat. So there is help here, kind of, but the key is that it requires this linebacker to be the low man in the bracket. Now, when Stanford runs, they're putting this guy in conflict between his run responsibility and his ability to get out to be that extra defender in coverage. So we can see right here, I'm actually going to put this in slow motion. This guy's initial reaction at the snap is actually to back off the line and outside. He would have been the low man in the bracket here in this buzz coverage to this side of the field. As he reads run away, watch how he's going to fold down inside. Right? He could be thinking this is power. He might be thinking these are down blocks coming at him or something. Right? So he comes down inside, and that's going to be the thing that lets, I believe, this center actually come and seal him off. So that guy should have been the second man out here to give help to this cornerback, but the run action really sucks him down inside. And the question of should he have done that, I guess it depends on exactly how he's being coached. A lot of teams will coach these outside linebackers on run action to drop off the line and then fold inside to add an extra number to the play side. So he could just be doing what he's coached to do. I mean, really, every defense is going to be weak against something, and what Stanford's done a really nice job of is identifying the conflict that this guy has between his run assignment and his pass assignment, and use that to get him sucked down inside so that they can get that one-on-one with the offensive lineman in the corner. Did that kind of answer the question? As a way for the lag. The other thing Stanford's doing is they're pulling their right guard as if they are running power. So once again, think about things from the perspective of this guy. You see the right guard pull away from you, signaling power. You see the offensive line stepping down toward you. All of your keys are telling you that this is a power run to the left. By the way, that's also what the pulling guard tells to these two linebackers right here. So the presence of this pulling guard and the fact that this is kind of a fake power play really encourages all this flow down to the inside, which is what allows Stanford to get this matchup with their offense right tackle and the cornerback there. Yeah, there's that outside linebacker who's gotten sucked down inside by the power action. And remember, the cornerback in this coverage was supposed to be the deep guy. Remember, he's the high man in the bracket. So when you isolate him and block him, then there really is no one over the top. And that's why there's no help there. That's why there's this clear lane to the end zone. So that's what Stanford's doing. This is just a really nice job of recognizing the inherent conflict in Oregon State's 3-4 defense and the way that they're playing coverage here and coming up with a play that kind of puts that outside linebacker in a really tough spot. I love this kind of stuff. All right. Let's move on to another Oregon State drive that's going to establish some important themes. We've seen that Stanford had a ton of wide receiver touts. Cool. Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad it helped. Okay, let's go to 11:53 in the first. Okay, so aside from Oregon State's offensive line, which does maybe better than we'd expect against the Stanford defense, the other guy who was, probably the wide receivers were the best players on the field for the most part. Oregon State's quarterback did a nice job. He did end up getting drafted in the 6th round, so not a super high round pick, but an NFL-worthy player nonetheless. And so, here we're going to see, I believe we've got Isaiah Hodgins up here at the top of the screen. He's facing a press. Oregon State's not going spread. They're using 2 tight ends to bring everybody into the box and create this isolation on that cornerback out on the edge. And when you've got the best player on the field, you make sure to use him. And here they go. It's fantastic wide receiver play on that. I mean, the cornerback's not doing a bad job there, right? So he's pressing. He's playing with inside leverage. He knows. And that's 17 who caught that ball, right? Yeah, so that is Hodgins. Exactly. So, and really you're not going to see this kind of thing from any other Oregon State receiver for the most part. So once again, Oregon State's got their 2 tight ends. Stanford's spinning a safety down into the box in order to give them an extra defender against the run. And so that means that this cornerback, that's a fantastic matchup, right? And that's what this cornerback had one bad play. I don't think I pulled it for this breakdown. But I mean, he's not bad. He won this matchup as often as he lost it, I've got to say. And so if you really love wide receiver and defensive back play, then this play is actually a really great example. So we know we've got a safety rolled down into the box to defend the run. The other safety, the weak safety, is way over here. This guy is straight up isolated. It is one-on-one between 2 really good Pac-12 players. Okay, because this cornerback doesn't have safety help anywhere near him, he wants to play with a slight inside shade. He wants to force Hodgins outside to the sidelines where he can use the sidelines as a 12th defender. So that's his goal, and that's what he's trying to do, and he does a good job of this. So let's actually just break this down from a defensive back perspective, okay? All right, so there we go. Here we got what's an offhand jam. Anytime you're talking about press technique, this is going to be one of the first things that you hear. So what we mean by offhand is that basically, as if you're like opening up to run, we can see that the right arm of Vadebo is his leading arm, and so his left arm is his off arm. Right? If you kind of look at the way that he's running, he's got this kind of back arm jam. And so the goal here is to redirect that wide receiver, to move him, to not let him get cleanly into his route. So that's good technique so far by the cornerback. Okay, now he's turning and running. Actually, if we can go back just a little bit more, we see that once the release happens, the corner is still over the top. Right, so the cornerback's doing a really nice job of getting that jam, forcing his receiver outside. They're at the numbers right now. If we look at where Hodgins started, he started up maybe a little closer to the hash than to the numbers. When he has to beat that jam, that's going to move him all the way out most of the way to the numbers. So good jam here by that corner. Right, they're at the numbers now. Okay, that's exactly what that corner wants when he doesn't have any safety help to the inside. Luton doesn't care. He's going to throw it anyway. By the time the ball is coming down, Hodgins is in between the numbers and the sidelines. So look at all that outside movement. He's still got the corner right with him. Really good cornerback play over the top. Hodgins doesn't have a step. This is a really nicely thrown ball into not a lot of space. Look how much room Luton has to work with here. He doesn't have a lot of space to drop that ball, because remember, if he throws this too far inside, this is going to be an interception. That corner is going to be able to come off it and pick it off. So he's got to put it between the cornerback and the sidelines, which is a couple of yards at most. And then Hodgins does a fantastic job of adjusting to the ball in the air, going up high, pointing it. Tough thing about man coverage, especially press, is that sometimes you can get the cornerback with his back to the ball. Right? So the corner here, to an extent, he's kind of face guarding Hodgins. He's not watching the ball in the air. He's playing this jam. He's playing this press, staying over the top of him. And so that's going to allow Hodgins to track the ball in the air a little bit better, to go up and high point it. And getting that left foot down was also an incredible amount of awareness of where the sideline is, just great body control. And look at that left foot right there. As he's going out of bounds, taking a hit from the cornerback, getting that little like heel tap before going out. That is a great matchup all across the board. So there we go. I always talk about the X's and O's stuff a little bit, but it is fun. We can get some kind of wide receiver and corner technique in there a little bit. Talk about offhand jams and forcing guys out to the sidelines, and it's a great play. I don't think that I pulled the play where Hodgins lost that matchup, but there was one where he got jammed up pretty well on a similar kind of route. Okay, let's check out another thing. So Oregon State, something that they did is that they kind of knew what they had in Hodgins, and they knew that he was going to be their best weapon. And so in this game especially, but in a lot of games, they did a lot to open things up for him schematically. They did a really good job of creating space and creating matchups for him. And so this is a kind of concept that we're going to see a lot in this game. So let me watch this. We're getting a little bit of motion. Okay, so we've already seen Stanford use play action to put defenders in conflict, and we're going to see that again right here. So Hodgins is up here at the top of the screen. He's the outside receiver, and Stanford's playing cover 3. So this cornerback is a deep outside third defender. And so what's that going to make him vulnerable to? Well, that'll make him vulnerable to routes that break back inside and underneath of him. If he's playing deep and outside, you want to attack underneath and inside. The Stanford linebacker number 2 mess up here? Is he supposed to drop into zone? Are you talking about the 11-14 play that we're about to start? Or the previous play? Are we talking about the 11-53 or the 11-14? Oh, the 11-14. Okay. Let's talk about that. Let's take a look at this coverage structure. It depends exactly what Oregon State's doing with their 3-4. It's either 2 or the outside linebacker here, depending on exactly what they're doing with their rush structure. I think... Well, anyway, all of these linebackers should be dropping into zone. So the key here on this play, remember that if the cornerback's playing outside and over the top, he's going to be vulnerable inside and underneath. And so the reason that Stanford's playing with that guy outside over the top, the way the structure of this coverage works is exactly as Hitlerday is saying. We need these linebackers dropping underneath anything that's going to break back inside. So the cornerback can take away stuff that's deep and outside. The linebackers can take away stuff that's shallower and inside. And so here Oregon State's going to throw a pretty good play action fake here. Not the hardest play action fake, but definitely one that gets really the entire Stanford linebacker core attacking the line of scrimmage. 2 is definitely a part of that. He's not blitzing here as far as I can tell, so he should be dropping out underneath this, but these other linebackers should be too. And when they don't, we see now they've all recognized their mistakes and they're all turning and running because they know, all of those guys should have been dropping into underneath coverage, but when none of them do, it really hangs out this cornerback to dry because he's playing outside and over the top. He's not really going to have a chance here. So yeah, depending on exactly what they're doing, maybe this outside linebacker should have been the curl flat defender. If he is a part of the rush or if they're doing some kind of matchup thing on this inside receiver, which they're probably doing, then yeah, I think maybe that this linebacker right here would have been the guy you'd expect to drop under this. And then if Hodgins would have continued across looking for his own window, then you're looking for these 2 linebackers to drop out and take away anything that breaks even farther inside. Yeah, the whole linebacker core really bit on that play action fake right there. Something else about this play this actually sets up something we're going to see later pretty well. We've seen Stanford use a pulling guard to trigger run reactions from the defense. Here, what Oregon State's doing is they're using this H-back to trigger that run reaction. So they're showing kind of like what I'd call a zone solid play, where they're showing a run to the right, a zone run to the right, and then they're bringing this H-back across the formation to kick out the backside edge defender. So let's actually watch that in slow motion. Okay, so here we go. Here comes the fake zone action. Offensive line seeming like they're zone stepping to the right. H-back number 84 crossing the formation, to kick out a backside edge defender. So they're doing things that make this look a lot like a run play, aside from the fact that Luton's just kind of waving the ball at the running back. The actual action looks a lot like run plays that they actually use. And we're going to see an even cooler way that they are able to set Stanford up with something like that later. But yeah, that gets all the linebackers to bite. 2 probably was the most immediate guy who made a mistake. 25 and 21 didn't do much better. Maybe the outside linebacker should have dropped 2. But here, Oregon State just doing a nice job of using their play action to create space for Hodgins and open him up to get the ball in his hands. So that's good scheme. That's that kind of plus value that Smith and his staff are contributing. Okay, let's check out 9:25 in the second, which is right here. All right, so once again, we've seen this matchup. We see slot receiver. We see 2 over 1. We know one of these guys is almost certainly blitzing. This nickelback out here is almost certainly, the nickel Sam is almost certainly blitzing off the edge. And on this play, he is. And that's going to mess up this power read that Oregon State's trying to run. So let's just watch the play. Motion back into the pistol. Okay. So this play, it's not a zone read, it's a power read. So Oregon State's pulling the left guard here. So there he goes. He's pulling. This could be a handoff to the running back to the right, or the quarterback can read this backside end and decide to keep the ball for himself. On this play, once again, remember we've seen before, when this guy blitzes off the edge, this defensive end knows that he's got that guy in the outside gap, and so that frees him up to come down hard inside. And so on this play, as the quarterback's reading him, right, this defensive end, he knows he's got a blitzer outside. He has no reason to sit wide, so he's crashing directly for the running back. That tells Luton to pull the ball and keep it. That end's almost able to trip him up anyway. But then when Luton does pull the ball and keep it, he's running right into that blitzing nickel Sam. So another good example, a positive example of how Stanford can use this blitzing secondary player to mess up the run play for Oregon State and cause these plays to bog down. Nice. Oh, the one where he doesn't see it. Yeah, and it's hard here. I mean, what would have been... is it a bad play? Yeah, this is a bad play. Well, Stanford won the play call here. It's not a bad play by Oregon State. The play only becomes bad when you look at what Stanford's doing in reaction to it. So Stanford wins the play call here because if you look at how this is developing post-snap. No, actually, this isn't a bad play call. It isn't. The fact that this defensive end can crash down with that blitz coming is what allows Stanford to win. So schematically, that's what they're doing. But Oregon State does have a blocker for that defensive end, it looks like. So Luton, I think Luton should have seen it pre-snap. Yeah. Well, let's look at this a little bit more. I'm curious about this now. So the block that really interests me is the left tackle on this defensive end. I actually don't think that this is a power read anymore, or if it is a read, then the conflict defender is the blitzer. So let's see. My new hypothesis is that Luton's reading the blitzer. Okay. Now, if Luton's reading the blitzer, he knows that blitzer can't get to the running back. Okay. So what we would want Luton to do is hand off here. Let's see what would have happened if he would have. Let's pretend this defensive end isn't here. So we're going to ignore him, because that's a different issue. But we're going to look at what would happen if Luton handed off here and that defensive end weren't there. Okay, so here we see a double team on this backside defensive tackle. Ideally, this combo block is going to be able to get up to this backside linebacker. So we've got 2 linemen to combo from the defensive lineman to the linebacker. We've got the tight end kicking out the defensive end down here. We've got the puller leading up to the linebacker. Oregon State can get this blocked play side. And there's no safety over the top. So if this gets play side, this could actually be a really big play depending on how well this combo block works. I don't think so, though. I don't think so, because if we look at the play side numbers, right? Oregon State's got 3 guys to the right of center, plus the pulling left guard makes 4. Stanford only has 4 defenders, so Oregon State's got 4 blockers for 4 defenders here. Okay, so if this defensive end doesn't exist, and we'll see that he shouldn't have existed, right? Kick out block, pulling guard leading up to the play side backer, combo block working up to the backside backer, no safety over the top. I think this play does have potential if it gets handed off. And so the question is, what's Luton reading and what's the mistake here? Originally, I talked as if Luton was reading this defensive end, but if we watch the left tackle is actually blocking that guy, right? The left tackle is trying to block that guy. So we can account for that guy. If that guy gets blocked and Luton hands off, then we've seen the play side's looking good. Okay. So what's Luton doing? What's he actually doing? My new hypothesis is that because we've seen that Oregon State's blocking this end, my guess is that Luton is reading the blitzer as a conflict player. And if you think about this guy as a very wide defensive end in a zone read, right? Luton's eyes flash out to him. He sees him blitzing, but there's no way that this guy can get to the running back, right? So for Luton's perspective, he's reading this guy. He sees he can't get involved in the run. He's thinking that he needs to hand this off. And as we've seen, the play side numbers are really good, right? So Luton was never meant to keep the ball against this look. I think that what happened is that we get right here, we get to the mesh point, and he sees that this defensive end's about to blow up his running back, right? He sees that the defensive end's about to blow up the mesh, and so that's why he pulls it. It's not because of what this blitzer did, I don't think. I think that the issue is that he doesn't get the opportunity to hand off to the running back because he knows this guy's going to blow it up. So that's why he keeps it. And then the nickel back ends it. So I think that the reads here in the scheme are actually good. I think that the failed block by this left tackle is ultimately the thing that sinks this play. That's my argument anyway. I'm always open to alternatives. Yeah, if we treat this guy as the conflict player, just think of him as the defensive end in his own read. Obviously, you hand off here, but the mesh gets blown up with the left tackle like almost pushing his defender into the mesh point. There is an amazing clinic. If you like this kind of stuff and like talking about who the conflict player is and where the read is, it's totally for free. It's on YouTube. Just Google, Mazzoni. There's a coach named Ron Mackey who's got a YouTube channel, and Mazzoni, I don't know how Mackey got that hookup, but Mazzoni goes on there and does like hour-long clinics every couple of weeks where he just shows film and like talks scheme. And he recently did an absolutely amazing clinic on the zone read, talking about what are the different ways to run the zone read, what are the different ways you can block it, who is going to be the conflict of the read player on each play. It's an incredibly entertaining hour and 20 minutes. So just Google Mazzoni and Ron Mackey. Actually, I'll put that in the chat if you want to check it out. But he's been on there a bunch of times. It's amazing. Only in 2020 could you get that kind of access to a coach on a YouTube channel. There you go. That's the channel you want to look out for, those Mazzoni clips where he really goes into depth about this kind of thing and reads and all that stuff on these kinds of plays. Really cool stuff. Okay, let's keep going. 8:48 in the second because I'm already like more than an hour into this and we're not even to the first half, but that's typical. That's how these live casts go. Okay. Let's check out this play. Okay, once again, not a lot new to see here. We're just going to admire Oregon State's double teams and the way that they're able to get movement on Stanford's front. Look at that front movement once again. Okay, so Oregon State doing a fantastic job of creating double teams to force those guys to flow, open up that cutback, cutback in quotes because the running back's cutting straight down the middle of the field after lining up on the hash, right? But just more of that. Earlier, I mentioned this H-back on the solid block coming across the formation to kick out a backside edge defender. I mentioned that made for effective play action. Well, here we're seeing why it's effective play action because here we see it on an actual run play. So here's that H-back crossing the formation, giving that kind of run action that we saw on a play action pass a little bit earlier. But those double teams are just insane. Really good stuff. Okay, let's go to 8:13. Here we go. Okay, so actually, let's watch this one more time because I want you to keep this in mind. Keep in mind what this H-back's doing, okay? He's crossing to kick out this backside edge defender. Emblazon that in your mind for the next play. All right, so there's that block, okay? Let's go a little bit later in the drive to see some classic Oregon State misdirection, which is one of the things that they do incredibly well. Okay. I don't even want to show the outcome of the play yet. Okay, so remember I told you to keep in mind this H-back and that Oregon State likes to, when they're running the ball to the right, they like to bring that guy across the formation to kick out a backside edge defender. Okay, so let's check that out right here. So there we go. There's that action, right? Here's 81 coming across to kick out the backside edge. Here's the run action to the right. Okay, so really good looking inside zone solid play, except it's not really. This is brilliant for two reasons, really. So now I'll show you what actually is happening on this play. It's not even a huge gain. It's just a really smart gain. And 81 missed his block there. But so what's happening here is that this is not actually a handoff to the running back at all. They're actually running a reverse or an end around with this outside receiver right here. So now keep an eye on that outside receiver. Watch him on his path to get the ball. So there's the handoff, right? So why am I so pumped about what this H-back is doing? Well, remember, he's coming across the formation on a run play to kick out this backside defensive end. So what's that going to do? When he comes across, that defensive end sees this guy coming to block him. So that defensive end, what he wants to do, he wants to jump down inside of that block and spill the ball outside to his linebackers and safeties on the backside. So when this guy sees 81 coming to block him, he wants to jump down inside. Let's put that in slow motion now. Okay, so here he is. He's jumped down inside, trying to play the run here, right? But 81 is not actually blocking him. So if we keep in mind that this receiver is running the end around, this guy has now just out-leveraged himself. There's no way that he, standing where he is facing toward the middle of the field is ever going to be able to turn and run outside with this receiver on the end around. So the reaction that this guy has to the solid block of this H-back out leverages him and lets this wide receiver outflank him. So it's brilliant for that reason. Then when you don't use 81 to block that defensive end, all of a sudden you have a bonus blocker on the edge to block for this end around. So this is that same H-back who'd done the fake solid motion. He already got the defensive end to out-leverage himself. Now he's free to release around the edge and take out this safety. And if he would have gotten a better block on him, there's a good chance that this is a touchdown, right? I think there's only a safety in the deep middle. If he takes that guy out, it looks like he's intentionally doing this. He's thinking that he's got a better chip on 3 than he actually did. He's thinking that he's gotten enough of him and that he can release up to the free safety and really turn this into a touchdown. He just leaves a little bit early. Right, because 81's got his eyes up to the free safety, and he's thinking he's going to get the touchdown block, but he leaves 3 a little bit early. So once again, the point here, this guy releases on a fake solid block. That causes the defensive end to out-leverage himself and allow the wide receiver to get the edge. And then when this guy releases up, he's able to block this safety, who's the only other guy who can really get to this reverse. Let's watch this one more time in slow-mo. Really brilliant play coming off of their base run game. Yeah, maybe 81 just messed up there. Cool. So I love that play. It didn't even get a first down, but sometimes those are the most interesting ones. Yeah. I'll put that in the chat. So when we're talking about zone, there are a lot of ways that you can call different things that you do with the H-back. Actually, I'll add brick in there too. Thanks for making me define this. I realized that I never did. So these are 3 tags, solid, slice, and brick, that you can use to talk about what your H-back is doing in the zone read game. So a solid block, it means this isn't a zone read, or we're not reading the defensive end. On a solid block, the H-back comes across and blocks the defensive end, just straight up. So you might not even be doing a zone read at all. A slice block is what we just saw, where the H-back crosses the formation and instead of blocking the end, releases up as a blocker for a quarterback keeper or for a reverse, an end around like we just saw. So solid is where he blocks the end, slice is where he releases around the end, and then brick is if you just use your H-back like a fullback to lead up to a second level defender or to a linebacker. So I'll use these terms to talk about that H-back's assignment here and there, but the solid block, specifically refers to when the H-back comes across and blocks the backside edge. Yeah, I probably should have defined that. And other people might call it different things. This is one of those things where there's no universal football language. So you might have heard that called something else. You could also just call it a kick-out block, although it's a specific kind of kick-out block that uses that action of the H-back crossing the formation. Cool. Okay, we can go through this next one fast, but just to show how critical these plays were. So here, once again, we've got 2 over 1. Notice that every time I pull this up, it's because this nickelback's blitzing. This is especially common with Stanford. So you can watch for that, assuming any games actually get played in 2020. Here we just see the classic thing. Oh, a wham block. So I've for me, I've always used wham. Yeah, I guess that fits into my definition of wham. So wham is when you use a fullback to block a defensive lineman, right? Yeah, so I've tended to use wham more for like blocking interior defensive tackles. I've definitely got wham in my vocabulary as well. But then I use solid, slice, and break to talk about those three different versions of inside and outside zone plays. Yeah, the wham block is a classic, especially when you can get like a fullback blocking a defensive tackle or something like that. That's good stuff. Urban Meyer loves trying a lot of that wham stuff. Okay, let's check out... Yeah, so let's check out this play. Once again, we don't need to dwell on this because this is just the classic bit that we've seen. We've got a defensive back blitzing off the edge against the run, and that's going to allow this defensive end to stab down inside and take away the cutback. So this is what Stanford's trying to do. All right, so there we see 52. He's come down inside the right tackle because he knows he's got that blitzer. So just the classic kind of adjustment that Stanford's been making throughout this game to shut these plays down and force Oregon State to miss field goals. Okay, one more blitz thing that I want to show about Stanford. This is 6:47 in the half. All right, so here, Stanford didn't do too much in terms of exotic blitzing. They did bring those nickel blitzes, like the 2-over-1 blitzes that we've been seeing. This is one time where they did just bring a straight-up safety blitz right up the gut here, and that's ultimately going to cause Luton to have to scramble and make a bad throw to force them into missing a second field goal. But the scheme here is fun because Oregon State's running play action. We've seen that's a major part of their offense. So the running back has to execute a run fake before he gets into protection. So here you can see this guy is kind of pretending like he has the ball. That's going to make it very hard for him to see this blitzing safety coming off the edge. So Oregon State's play action is kind of working against them a little bit when this running back's not able to be a factor in protection here. You know, he gets out to his credit, but the quarterback feels that pressure, and that's what along with the pressure for this defensive end, and kind of that chaos going on around him causes him to roll a little bit instead of waiting to throw this. So just, this is kind of a classic, if you take the running back out of the protection here, this is a classic overload scheme where you're using your two defensive linemen to take out the guard and the tackle, and then just blitzing the safety in between them. It's also a good way to get a one-on-one matchup with a blitzer and a running back, which Oregon did a lot against USC and probably in some other games. I heard a whole bunch of stuff on Patreon about that matchup too. Blitzing the back, good stuff. Okay, so that is going to end that drive. Stanford's got one more touchdown drive, so we should check that out. Here we go. Which one is it? Oh yeah, so I mentioned earlier that Stanford's wide receivers, just being bigger and more talented than Oregon State's secondary was a huge factor. This is kind of a risky throw by Mills, but I guess when you've got that wide receiver talent who can just go up and get it, then you can make that throw and count on him to go get you some yards after catch. The scheme here is a little bit interesting. So this is something we're going to see a little bit. Oregon State's playing basically what looks like two-man. They're playing a little bit tight with these safeties for maybe a typical two-man look, but they are manned up on the receivers who are split out wide. Traditionally in two-man or any related coverage, you're going to have your defensive backs playing with inside leverage because two-man requires a lot of people in coverage. You have to have 7 guys in coverage because you have to have 5-man defenders and 2 deep safeties. And so basically your linebackers here are in man coverage on the 2 running backs because you just don't have anyone else who can pick up those guys. So what that means is that when the linebackers have to be involved in man, that means you have no guaranteed help inside in the middle of the field. And so we're going to see Oregon State's defenders trying to play with inside leverage to take away inside breaking throws here. That's going to give Stanford's receiver up here at the top of the screen a relatively clean outside release. And then what the quarterback's doing is just making what's called a hole throw against cover 2. So in cover 2 zone, not normally man, the cornerback could be squatting in the flat and the safety would be playing the deep half over the top. And so the whole throw is in between the cornerback and the deep safety. Mills is basically doing that, but here that cornerback's got this like press inside leverage, playing a trail technique on that receiver, and Mills just puts it outside, working against that leverage. Remember, that defensive back wants to play inside leverage, so Mills is just going to throw it outside and let his wide receiver reach out and get it. This is what I didn't understand about Stanford's offensive strategy. Yeah, this drive was 100% those big wide receivers. And I will say, Oregon State did not change up what they were doing. I mean, you would have thought that they would have had to do something else to take away plays like this, but maybe you're right that Stanford didn't put enough pressure on them with the downfield passing game, because they had a ton of success with it when they threw it, but they never really were able to force Oregon State to get out of their base game plan. That might have led to Stanford scoring, 31 points instead of what could have been a lot more. And they really could have blown this game open, especially in the first half here where Oregon State's getting bogged down. Yeah, I mean, a ton of screen passes, bad rushes. Exactly. So this play really set Stanford up for the touchdown. Just relying on that one. Man, look at that. He even gave him a little, push off, right? Not in a bad, if you get away with it, I'm never going to complain. I don't mean push off in a bad way, but there's that little left arm to get that separation from that trail defender. The quarterback just throws it high and outside. Not bad scheme there. If you're going to throw against two man, if you're facing a coverage where the cornerback's going to play inside with a press, throwing outside is a good thing to do. With that safety over the top, it's a little bit risky, but I guess if you're not trying to beat the corner and you're trying to throw it outside, then that safety's not going to get there. But there are a lot of defenders around there. A lot of big plays against man coverage in this game for both sides. So let's look at the next one, which is 2:36 in the second. Should be right here. No, it's the previous play. All right, so here it is, just live. Similar idea. Although here we're getting off coverage, more of a cover 3 maybe. Yeah. So here we're looking at, once again, Oregon State's playing with pretty severe inside leverage by this cornerback right here. They want to keep this wide receiver out of the seams, away from the dig route, stuff like that. So this cornerback's playing pretty far inside. That's going to give this guy a free outside release. It looks like there might be a stutter and go or something like that. There's something to hold that corner. Or maybe even not. Maybe he just gets beat. But yeah, so the quarterback, again, is just throwing it outside of that cornerback's alignment and letting his big receiver go up and get it. So yeah, when Stanford did this, they were incredibly successful. They did a nice thing with personnel on the touchdown here. I want to check out. Here we go. All right, so what Stanford's doing here that's nice is they have a million tight ends in the game, as they often do, but one of those tight ends is split out at the X receiver spot, this weak side receiver spot. So they're down here at the goal line after those two big passing plays. Here they've got number 84, their kind of stud tight end, lined up against a much smaller cornerback, because Oregon State's got all these big guys in the box to defend this two tight end run heavy formation at the goal line. So that means that they're covering, they want all their safeties involved in run defense as well. They're rolling the dice a little bit by covering this tight end with a cornerback in man, and Mills is going to take that matchup all day. Same matchup, by the way, inside leverage, right? Giving a relatively clean release to the outside. The quarterback's just going to throw it high and outside and let his guy make the play. So that's a mismatch right there. And yeah, I mean, I was wondering why Stanford didn't do more of that in this game. Their offensive line wasn't fantastic in pass protection, but they weren't prohibitively bad. So it's weird that maybe a part of it is just that they got up 21-0, early in the second half, and then they were trying to salt away the game with the run. Maybe that was a part of it. They almost gave the game away, though. All right, that's halftime. I'm going to take a quick pause to refill my water and see if there are any questions or anything. So feel free to put it in the chat if you've got anything. I'll be back in a sec. right, there's the intermission. Yeah, the first half was kind of boring from a scoring perspective. The second half really picks up. We're going to get 6 touchdowns, I think, in 2 quarters. All right. One of my favorite plays of this game is coming up. Let's look at 8:31 in the third. Start to see how this game opens up. Both teams start going a little crazy here. Okay, so here we've got a 4th and 1. Oregon State came up with a big stop on the previous play. Here we've got 4th and 1. Stanford now this time is bringing everybody in tight to the core of the formation. Let's see. Only real question I've got left is whether Mills actually played a good game or not. Yeah, I'd be curious to talk about that. I mean, I was kind of keeping an eye on both quarterbacks as I was breaking it down, and there were a number of throws that Luton made that were really fantastic, and he stood out to me. And so I was kind of doing like the Mills-Luton side-by-side comparison. I think that Mills does as well as the people around him will allow him to do. I don't think that there's a ton of plus value coming from him, at least not last year. That was my impression. I don't think that he yet brings that much of his own to the offense. Okay, so here we've got 4th and 1. We're going to see a big danger that can happen in 4th and 1. His completion percentage is high, but that's inflated by a ton of screens. Exactly, screen, and ultimately they are still a West Coast offense kind of ball control kind of team. Something that Shaw does do a good job of is using leverage to create those easy inside or relatively short outside breaking throws, like with the tight end option routes and things like that. They complete a lot of slants and things like that. And then you look at the downfield passing game, and you're looking at some of these matchups here, and that kind of outside ball placement, there's some precision that's required there. But yeah, I think he's as good as the people around him are. I don't see like great timing or a lot of really early throws or things like that, definitely. And that'd tie into kind of your point about the reads. So this is just showing something that you can get into when you run cover 0 on 4th and 1. You do run the risk when you have no deep safety over the top, but once that running back clears your second level. Yeah, exactly. So here, let's take a look at what's happening here. So Oregon State does a really nice job of making a pile. Oregon State does a really nice job of making a pile here in the middle of the formation and forcing the running back to bounce out wide here. What Oregon State's defensive line is doing is they're doing a good job of commanding double teams. I mean, Stanford's never going to leave a double team on 4th and 1. They just want to get movement on these first level defenders. But we can see that everybody for Stanford's occupied. This defensive lineman goes down. He kind of submarines the 2 guys who are double teaming him. All these guys are occupied with blocks. So Oregon State's actually going to end up with an unblocked cornerback on the edge. And Stanford actually can't get a blocker up to this middle linebacker who's going to scrape backside. So this middle linebacker and the cornerback should have been able to take away this cutback by the running back here. The middle linebacker is just going to take kind of a bad angle. He's not really going to square up very well. The running back's going to cut back inside. I mean, that's a pretty terrible missed tackle. And if you're in cover 0, once you miss that tackle, then that guy's gone. So big play for Stanford here, setting up their 3rd touchdown of the game. Exactly. I mean, yeah, that linebacker had a bad day in the film room on this play. Speaking of people who had bad days, let's check out this safety on the next play, who's going to get mossed by a quarterback. Is this the right play? Let me make sure that I feel like this is in the wrong end zone. Oh, that's going to be their 4th touchdown. Okay, never mind. So here we've just got another example of Stanford closing off the drive by throwing to a big receiver outside. There's a little bit of a nice kind of scramble drill reaction here. So initially this outside receiver is running a curl, which once again, it's not a great play call. We see the cornerback playing with this inside leverage. That's going to be really common in this cover 0 look that Oregon State's showing to get inside leverage from this guy because he knows all these guys are attacking the run. He doesn't have any help. So he's going to want to force his guy outside to the sidelines. as he's doing right here. And Stanford's calling a curl on this. So they're kind of hoping that that receiver is going to be able to climb over the top of his defender and open up on a curl. But a curl against this kind of inside leverage and a pretty predictable cover zero look isn't the best play call. Another example where the scheme isn't really opening this up, but other stuff is. So Mills is going to do that little half roll out. He's going to do a fantastic job of avoiding this unblocked rusher, which was a good improvisational play. But, at this point, it's not the curl getting open that causes this touchdown. It's what happens once Mills rolls and has to avoid an unblocked defender, which is that, this receiver who had run his curl or whatever, breaking to the inside, he just follows his quarterback back to the outside and ends up getting the reception for the touchdown. So, once again, not the best route, I think, against the coverage that you probably knew that Oregon State was going to run. But Stanford's players make it work by being kind of on their toes and improvising a little bit. It's weird. I mean, I normally think about Stanford as doing a really good job with the leverage and the matchups and things, but in this game we're seeing some kind of passing plays that aren't the best conceived. But their players are making it happen. All right, finally, Oregon State is going to get their first touchdown of the game. Let's go to 4:19 in the third. Just going to be right here. All right. Exactly, but even when there is, you can still call routes that also give that guy a leverage advantage. You know what I mean? Like, it's true that you probably could throw anything to him, but you can run a fade that attacks outside. You could run a back shoulder. You could give him an out. I mean, there are all sorts of things that you could do that would still try to take advantage of that leverage. Or to put it another way, once again, that's one of those, like, if it works, it's never a bad call. Yeah, the Oregon State's defensive backs are they're giving up a lot of height to these Stanford receiving threats. And yeah, once again, as I said earlier, it's never a bad call if it works. So if you call a play with bad leverage, but your guy just goes up and gets the ball, then fine, that's a matchup call. You know that your guy's better than their guy. But still, as a schemer, X's and O's person, I'd like to see you make those throws in a way that also gets that guy an advantageous leverage situation. Really give him the best shot to make the play. Don't put it all on the players. All right, let's check out this play. Here's an example of the Stanford defense not learning from the past. Those of you who are on Patreon are going to be very familiar with this play. So this is just something that USC ran against Stanford ad infinitum. So Oregon State's 2x2. They've got a running back offset to the short side of the field. They're running a snag slants combination. I think we saw this in the Utah breakdown too. So the outside receiver is going to run a slant. The inside receiver is going to run a corner, and the running back is going to release out into the flat. Meanwhile, we've got two slants coming from the top of the screen. All that's happening is Luton's looking out here. He knows he's got three routes attacking to the short side of the field, and he knows that Stanford only has two defenders over the top of those three routes. So he's going to look to the snag side here. There's a blitzing linebacker who makes this even worse look for Stanford because now they really only have two defenders lined up over three receivers. Stanford's also taking this backside linebacker and dropping him to the vertical route that we've got right here. He's probably got to do that because of the blitz from the linebacker. He's got to be ready in case this receiver breaks inside, with that blitz coming. So he's doing what he's supposed to do. But ultimately, the problem is that Stanford just doesn't have enough defenders to take away this concept. And they also didn't have enough defenders to take it away against USC. So they're just getting burned by the same coverage in 3 different games now, playing essentially the same coverages. So I'd be curious, I haven't charted enough Oregon State to know if this is something that they often run or if it's something that they put in after watching the film. But Stanford is incredibly susceptible in their blitz game to these kind of zone overloads. And the USC game was just ugly. I had a whole breakdown of that on my Patreon as well. Okay, so there is Oregon State just doing a nice job of game planning Stanford's coverage. Let's check out 3:13 and keep it moving. Yeah, there was definitely a clear book on how to beat the Stanford defense. I think that they're getting pretty problematic schematic coaching. Yeah, I think their defensive coordinator was mostly hired as a recruiter. He's someone who'd been around for a long time as a recruiter and position coach. There was finally an opening and they promoted him, but I don't know that he's really got the schematic chops that they need to set him up well, which is why you should never promote recruiters with, you should never prioritize at the coordinator position recruiting, because it doesn't matter how good your recruits are if there aren't enough of them at the place where the receivers are. If you only have 2 defenders going up against 3 receivers, it doesn't matter if they're 5 stars or not. They're never going to win. Let's check out 313. That's just me as a scheme guy saying recruiting doesn't matter, which isn't entirely true. But you can see the problem. If your coordinator's bad, you just keep running into these, and every team in the conference figures out how to beat you with it, and it doesn't matter how your recruiting is. Okay. What is this play? Oh, speaking of Stanford running into trouble, this is like Todd Orlando bad, actually. Let's watch it live. We talked in previous weeks about how Orlando might give up more big plays at USC than Pendergast did, and I kind of described some things that I'd seen from Texas's defense that gave me pause, and here Stanford's getting into the same issue. So here's Stanford's blitzing, that nickel back like they often do. It's pretty predictable at this point. We see the 2-over-1, so we know that it's coming. And so what's happening here? So once again, Oregon State is they're 2x2. They're releasing 3 receivers out to the wide side of the field. It's a different concept. It's not snag again, but it's the same basic idea. So Stanford's blitzing this nickel back. So in order to cover up 1, 2, 3 routes, they're going to need this linebacker to widen with the running back. Otherwise, they're going to get outnumbered again. And we see that's exactly what happens. So here comes the blitz. The running back releases. This linebacker has to insert as the 3rd coverage defender to prevent them from getting outnumbered. The problem is that when this linebacker widens with the running back and vacates the middle of the field, there's going to be nobody left in the middle of the field when Oregon State runs a shallow cross, as they do right here. So that guy's able to get big time yards. So this is just, blitz coverage, any zone blitz coverage is going to inherently run the risk of getting outnumbered like this. I don't want to bag on Stanford too much for this particular play, because any call could run into this kind of situation, but I do think that this is kind of especially bad. Having this much open space when the offense is running a shallow cross seems pretty miserable. You're thinking number 2. So that's all. So that's the question of what the rules are. And he looks like he's pretty deliberately, walling or carrying this seam. We talked about that a little bit with Stanford's coverage before, how they use these curl flat defenders to kind of carry the seams. I try to be impartial on here, we've got that threat of 2x2. We've got that threat of 4 verticals. It's possible that this linebacker should have come off this, but remember, he does still have a receiving threat out here, and this cornerback still is exposed as a deep outside sideline defender. So, the real problem is that number 2 here couldn't have been right no matter what he did. And I guess that's my real problem with this coverage. Because if number 2 jumps down inside to take the shallow cross, but this guy runs a curl, then he's hanging the cornerback out to dry, right? Like, if this guy's running a curl right here, the cornerback doesn't have a chance on it. So if this guy's jumping the shallow cross, his real problem is that he's in underneath coverage. He's 1-on-2 with the vertical route and with the shallow cross, and that there's no defender on the other side of the field to pick up the shallow cross when it comes to him. So it depends on what the coaching points were, but this is really just Oregon State doing a nice job of 2-on-1ing that linebacker right there. Yeah, this is I don't know. I'd rather see an evenly distributed defense that gives its players a chance to rally. If you're going to play this way, I'd rather see an evenly distributed defense that gives its defenders a chance to rally and maybe gives up the throw to the flat up here. As it is, this is almost like a matchup zone to the wide side of the field, and that they're matching all 3 of Oregon State's receiving threats, but then it doesn't match up on the backside. So this guy's just getting outnumbered 1-on-2. I do not like this coverage, obviously. This is Smith genius then. Well, I don't know how much of a genius you have to be to see these kind of problems in Stanford's coverage. It's definitely Smith being smarter than Stanford's defensive coordinator. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. But Smith's definitely not the only guy who did this or got these matchups. And maybe you could argue he could have called it sooner, but he called a pretty good game, so I don't have a lot of complaints about Smith in this game. I mean, whether a play's brilliant or not, it's always relative to what the other team calls. And here he smoked Stanford's defensive coordinator. That's another play where it doesn't matter how good of a receiver this guy is, right? If he's playing in this much space, he could be a 2-star. He's still going to walk for a first down. All right. I think we're finally going to get to Oregon State's touchdown. Oh, this touchdown's amazing. The catch here is absolutely insane. Once again, Hodgins being, probably the best player on the field. And the catch is the really crazy thing. We'll talk scheme in a second, but reaching back one-handed to tip the ball to himself for the touchdown. Let's slow-mo that. I didn't pull the replay where it's blown up and bigger, but so here's Hodgins up here. Luton throws it a little bit behind for reasons we'll talk about. Tips it up one-handed to himself for the touchdown. That's insane. So let's talk about the scheme now that we've kind of looked at the talent here. So Stanford's basically in quarters here. So we're going to see the cornerback dropping out to play deep outside quarter, safety playing an inside quarter. This nickel back, I think it is, playing the curl flat underneath. And so Stanford, unlike the previous play, is going to be able to cover everybody here. So here we've got the cornerback, the receiver on that play. He was a 2-star. Well, there you go. Case in point. So here we see Stanford's quarter structure with the cornerback dropping, being a deep sideline defender, the safety playing inside, and then the nickel back is able to jump this route by the running back. So Stanford is 3-on-3. They're not outnumbered here. But Oregon State's doing another. So we've talked about Stanford a few times not taking advantage of the leverage matchups that they had. Oregon State's doing a really good job of taking advantage of this leverage matchup. So Oregon State here, they've got these receivers. They're not quite compressed, but they are pretty close to each other. Either way, we can see that this is triggering Stanford's deep quarters players to play inside-outside. So we see both of these receivers are between the numbers and the hash. The safety's playing on the hash, so he's well inside. And this cornerback's playing outside, too, to defend the deep sidelines. And so what Oregon State's doing to attack this is that they're running just 2 slants, basically. So this inside receiver's running a slant to pull this safety, and then the outside receiver's running a slant to take advantage of the outside leverage by the cornerback. So let's slow that down a little bit. All right, so Hodgins made a great catch here, but we see he's got the throwing lane right here exists, because he's running an inside breaking route versus an outside leveraged cornerback. So they could have thrown a fade to Hodgins here, and he could have gone up and gotten it just because he's good. But this play lets him augment his talent with something that gives him the best possible position to beat his defender, which is the difference between Smith and Shaw in this game in a lot of ways, which is weird because normally that's not a Shaw problem, or historically it hasn't been. But, I think Stanford's got the worst combination of coordinators that they've had, since the late 2000s. Other good stuff about the scheme, we've seen they're using this inside receiver to pull away this safety. He's also going to pull away this linebacker right here. So that's going to be what frees up Hodgins to work against this outside leveraged cornerback. The other thing that makes this play open up is, in fact, the running back. He's free releasing here, so he is not a part of the protection at all. They need him in the flat. They want him in the flat, and that's because they know he's going to widen this nickel back right here. So as the running back goes out, we see the nickelback starts to widen with him, and that's also going to create this lane that Luton puts the ball in. By the way, this isn't a bad throw by Luton. He's fitting this into a very tight window. No interceptions in this game. Remember, making these tight throws is either brilliant or stupid depending on how often you complete it versus how often it's picked off. No interceptions in this game, so I think we got to call that a good throw. I don't think there were even very many scary balls that could have been intercepted here. So really threading the needle here. I mean, the nickelback for Stanford does a nice job of jumping back inside. I mean, both of these guys do a pretty good job of recovering But Luton fits it in there really well, and Hodgins makes a fantastic catch. So good combination of scheme and execution. That was a good play all around, I'd say. I mean, Stanford's coverage here isn't bad either. I like dropping out this linebacker and the way that they're using him to kind of replace this nickelback when he has to widen. I think there's a lot of good stuff here, but Oregon State just executes better. Boom. Good stuff. All right, so now it is 21-7. Oregon State's starting the comeback. Stanford's only going to score 10 more points. Yeah, so you're thinking that Hodgins should have stopped, like just hit that zone void and just, 2 quick chops and hold still. Let him use his body to box out that cornerback. I can see that for sure. If he just stops right here, the cornerback would have to come over his back to get him. He might not get into the end zone maybe, but he'd probably get the first down, and it's 1st and 10 anyway, so. Yeah, if he just plants and stops, then he makes things a little bit easier for Luton. Yeah, and so on that model, this is actually a perfectly accurate ball from Luton, right? If you think that maybe he's expecting Hodgins just to freeze, then Luton actually put it exactly where he should have. And Hodgins took a step or two too many. But, we're going to have my favorite highlight in the end zone coming up. Okay, so let's get to the next drive, which is going to make it 14-21. Stanford's starting to get a little bit nervous. 13:07 in the 4th. Here we go. Okay, so one of the themes that we established early on was the way that Oregon State was able to use things like play action to create good leverage matchups and to open up space for Hodgins, who also happened to be a great receiver. So Hodgins' production is really a combination of good scheme and his inherent ability. We're going to see a good example of that here. By the way, do we know what's happening up here? Yeah, obviously. So let's take a look. So here we see that. I don't know if he's actually blitzing here, but he's definitely involved in the run fit. We can say that for sure. This is the look that USC absolutely slaughtered Stanford with too, by the way. Jumping this guy down inside. So not the most unpredictable coverage. Okay, so let's look at what is actually happening here. Remember, I've talked about how Stanford was using their slot defenders to carry potential seam routes. We remember that there was this kind of threat, which does exist here. We've got a threat of 4 verts. Even though there are 2 tight ends up here, not 2 receivers, it'd be totally possible for this guy to pop outside and this guy to release down the seam. So there is a 4 vertical threat. Stanford is going to be asking this defender to carry any vertical route by this slot receiver in order to defend 4 verticals. So we're going to see that right here. Right, here's that guy. He's playing outside. He wants to force this guy inside toward the safety in the middle of the field. And what that's going to do, if we go back here, if this guy has to run vertical with a vertical push by the slot, what that's going to do is take him away from this place where he is on the hash about 10 yards deep, and that's just going to open up a dig for Hodgins to work back inside. Right, so here's that other vertical route pulling away, the safety and the guy that was covering it. Here's the cornerback who gets beat to the inside. And when Stanford has to use the guy who was parked right here on the hash to carry that vertical route that's going up here and away, then that's going to open up all sorts of space for Hodgins in the middle. A part of this is play action. So here's the guy who's either blitzing, or if not blitzing, is definitely involved in the run fit. He's going to read the run coming toward him, and so he's going to attack. If this guy would have dropped into coverage, he might have been able to replace this seam defender underneath Hodgins' route. But when this guy attacks the line of scrimmage and comes up on the run action like that, once again, common look from Stanford, by the way. We see that a lot in this game. I'll show you right here. Linebackers turning their backs to the ball and running, hoping to find a receiver. Very common look in this game for Stanford's defense. And they have nobody in position to get under that kind of dig by Hodgins. And there he definitely made the right play by running away from that cornerback, showing the complexity of the wide receiver position. All right, so nice job there opening up their star receiver. Here comes a play that does not involve Hodgins at all, which is kind of rare in this breakdown. This is how they made it 21-14. So we'll just check this out live, and then I'll come back for the breakdown. There it is. All right, who is that? Is that Artavis Pierce? I think it is. Okay, so once again, the thing that Oregon State's done incredibly well in this game is getting double teams on these interior defensive linemen. We're going to see that here. That's why we established this theme earlier. Look at that movement, right? Both of these defensive tackles have their backs to the ball and are like pushed way downfield. And what that really does, the thing that really makes this play go, though, and the guy that we really have to call out here, the guy that we really have to call out here in a good way is this right tackle, okay? Because this guy is going to end up making the critical block on this strong side linebacker here, okay? So check out this blocking, right? Just perfect man-on-man all the way across the board. The center's releasing all the way out here to this guy, okay? But the key block is really this right tackle getting all the way from the hash to the middle of the field to block this strong side linebacker. So let's watch him. There's that movement. Defensive tackles totally cleared out, opening up that cutback that we've been talking about. Okay, here's the linebacker who's in position to fill that lane, but here is the right tackle who started out this play on the hash. Great hustle play. Getting up to that linebacker who had all the leverage advantage in the world. Exactly, hat on a hat, able to block up everybody. And it goes in for the score. And, I can't overemphasize when these combo blocks or even these one-on-one blocks are able to clear out these interior defensive linemen, that opens up a lot of space for these backside linemen to get up and make those play side blocks. So it all starts down here with the interior line, and then the right tackle kind of finishes it off. The right tackle is the reason this was a touchdown instead of a 5-yard gain. But clearing out the middle of the formation like this is just incredible. Yeah. He doesn't even look that quick. Oregon's got an offensive tackle that I'd expect, or Oregon had an offensive tackle that I'd expect to make that play as a matter of course. That right tackle is not the most athletic guy in the world, but the linebacker was a little bit slow to attack the line. Okay, so good stuff from the Oregon State offensive line. We can also comment on, I've mentioned before that, these linebackers, it is tough for them to attack the line of scrimmage too much on a zone play just because the front is moving. That's what a zone play is trying to do. So they do have to work laterally. And I think you would like to see this guy press the line of scrimmage a little bit here. Because if this guy is at the line of scrimmage instead of 3 yards deep here, then he's basically made a pile. The running back's then going to have to cut back to this unblocked linebacker. So that guy definitely could have played better. I think that's probably 25. He's playing a little tentatively, and when that right tackle, and the right tackle wouldn't even get to him, he should have been able to come underneath the block of that right tackle to fill that gap. But instead he gets blasted out a little bit and opens it up. There we go. Okay. Let's go to Stanford's final touchdown drive. A touchdown a quarter. It's a good way to do it. And this is going to be... Oh, yeah. I don't think that this is actually the touchdown, but it's the play that sets it up, really. So Oregon State here, remember earlier I mentioned that even though Stanford had those big receivers who were burning them, the Beavers didn't back off. They didn't try to go conservative to try and take away those throws. They just kind of lived with it. Here we're seeing some of their more aggressive safety play in this game. So the ball right here is at about, getting up to the 31. We see that their safety's playing only about 10 yards deep. And they are bringing a blitz of their own. So they're bringing a blitz from this nickel back up here at the top of the screen coming off the edge, right? Okay, so what's happening here is that they're ultimately going to end up... Actually, let me double check the formation here. This is a really aggressive look now that I look at it. So if we think about this, Stanford's got a tight end right here. It's not 84. So maybe Oregon State's not too worried about it. If this guy runs down the seam, I think this guy's going to be, or if this guy runs like a slot fade, working out to the sideline, I think this safety could be in kind of a tough spot. So this is a pretty aggressive play. Maybe they know that Stanford's not going to run vertical with this guy. I don't know. But what Oregon State's ultimately doing, they're bringing this blitz from the top of the screen, and then they're using this guy as an inside defender to bracket 84 up here. So if we look at how this develops post snap, right? We see this safety is playing with outside leverage. He's outside the hash. He's going to deny the sidelines to this tight end right here who's split out. And then this far side safety is going to be the inside defender. And the problem is that there's just a little bit too much space in between these safeties to play this way. And they're also going to run into each other a little bit. Okay, so right here we see there's the outside man in the bracket. Here we see that far side safety coming over to try and get the big kill shot here and knock this ball out. But really they just kind of run into each other and the tight end's able to get away for a huge gain. But Oregon State did not go any more conservative with their coverage here at the end. They were playing to limit possessions, get the ball back and try to climb out of that first half hole that they dug themselves. That's like 10 yards. I'm trying to remember when I wrote that. I think that I was talking about Love's last season. Wasn't Love still there in 2018? When did Love get drafted? Was his last year 2018? Because the year before that they were really good. Yeah, Love's last season was 2018. That was the one that I wrote about where the offensive line was starting to go downhill. The 2017 was still a good year. There they had the combination of Love. Oh, well, yeah, I guess that depends on how you define good. I mean, Love was still, he wasn't the same guy that he was in 2017, obviously. But in 2018, to the extent that Stanford had an effective running game, in 2018, it was Bryce Love being good. But the run game definitely took a step back, and you see that in the production of those backup running backs who just went nowhere, and those were like recruited guys too. Yeah, so Oregon State not pulling the pedal off the gas. They wanted to get this ball back, and they might have set themselves up for this a little bit here. But you got to admire their spirit. This is the kind of, that's the kind of aggressive coverage call that's a lot easier to make when you're kind of the underdog and you're expected to lose a little bit. It's a lot easier to make that call than when, if you're favored to win this game and you make this call, then your fan base is like calling for all the coaches to be fired the next morning. Not that I have any experience with message boards. But, Oregon State they played fast and loose. I think that, they know that they're trying to build that program momentum and they're willing to take chances to do it. All right, let's go to Oregon State's next touchdown drive, starting at 9:31 in the fourth, which we're looking at drives now, so I'm going to switch over to the full broadcast. I didn't have time to grab these before we started today. Let's see where we are. Okay, so we're going to go to 9:31 in the fourth and check out a couple plays from Oregon State's last touchdown drive. Just got to scroll ahead a little bit more. And these live casts are really giving me the chance to go back and watch a lot of film on games that I hadn't broken down before. This has been awesome. 9:31 in the fourth. Hold on. Oh, I need to show this play. I'm glad that I saw this. This is the play I've been talking about. So I'm going to scroll that back a little bit. This play is hilarious. I'll give you 3 guesses as to who that receiver is if you don't already know. If you're 7-1 Sark, you play it safe. Yeah. Let's see here. So actually, it's not the scheme that I love here. I love the end around to Oregon State. I just think that the personnel is hilarious. And like the way that it gets caught. So here, I agree that the scheme here actually doesn't do anything. Oregon State's not fooled at all here. They end up with double coverage on the receiver. But the funny thing is that the receiver is this quarterback, and he's going to go up, knock off a safety, and high point the ball for the touchdown. The scheme here actually doesn't do anything. Like Oregon State's got this covered, but. And normally quarterbacks don't look quite that, he almost looks like those big wide receivers he's been throwing to all game. And you know that safety. I mean, that safety probably had to run some stadium stairs after giving up a contested ball to a quarterback. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's those 13-year-old. Actually, which corner is that? Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous play. We don't even need to talk about this game because it didn't work. It's just kind of fun. I mean, if you would have told me that that was Mills throwing to Parkinson, I would have believed it, but when you flip those two. Too good. All right, let's move on from that one. Okay, there's some cool passing game stuff coming up. Exactly. Yeah. Who did it better? Okay, now we can go to Oregon State's next touchdown drive. There's a million highlights of that play. Okay, we've talked a little bit about the way that Oregon State was able to open Hodgins up. And, you know, Smith, aside from the trick plays and the misdirection, he's not doing a lot that's new, but there is something that I think is kind of a pro-style trend. It's a route that I haven't seen run a ton. Maybe Hidladay can fill me in on some more examples. But what's ultimately going to happen here is we've got, you know, two tight ends up here. We've got slot for twins receivers down here at the bottom of the screen. And all that Oregon State's doing is they're running off the cornerback with this outside receiver. But the thing I'm really interested in here is the route run by Hodgins here. He's going to end up breaking out to the sidelines almost like on a corner route or a sail route. But he's releasing so far inside to get to that corner route. It's almost like a cross return route. Like he's releasing way far inside before coming out to the sidelines. That's a really long developing route. And that is something that I've seen. I watched a little bit of Keenan Allen film for something I did on Patreon. And I saw that a bunch from the Chargers, for example. I don't think I've seen it a ton from college teams. I think this is a relatively new route that I haven't seen a ton of. And so seeing Oregon State kind of being an early adopter of that is something that interests me a lot. Because, look, I mean, Hodgins ends up all the way here at the middle of the field before breaking out. It's kind of an interesting play. And normally you don't have like this kind of all 22 shot, so maybe it's run more often. I just haven't seen it around the Pac-12, but this strikes me as being a little bit unique. And it is something I've seen it in the NFL. The thing that this really does is I think it just catches this safety by surprise. So if we kind of watch how this is developing, once again, Oregon State is going to end up getting some help from their running back widening number 10 here, who's going to widen out and create some space and pull him up. But if we look at the safety's reaction on this play, the safety's in a great position to defend this route right now. He's playing outside, but he's almost going to get caught by surprise when Hodgins stops this thing and bangs it back out. Right, the safety really lets that guy cross his face, and I think it's because he's not expecting that on that crossing action. Got to believe in your protection. Yeah, you cannot run this if you have a sieve of an offensive line, especially when you're inviting these linebackers to attack the line on play action. And they are getting, you know, there's not a lot of man blocking going on here. They're all kind of sliding and protecting a gap instead of protecting a man, which makes it a little bit easier. You know, so their pass protection and their play action fake marry up really well there. But yeah, that route takes a long time to develop. Have you seen too many of those in the Pac-12? And my guess is that it's even a relatively trendy thing in the NFL. So anyway, I thought that was really cool. I wanted to always want to point out new scheme stuff or stuff that surprises me where I can. Let's go ahead to 905. Here we go. Oh yeah, this is a play. I talked about this in my Patreon too. I broke down Smith's offense in kind of a lengthier post. But the misdirection element here, and notice by the way how many different kinds of misdirection there are in this offense. We've seen so many different things that really kind of play. Yeah, I don't know what to call it. In and out on my tally sheet. Yeah, it's not that dumb because I use in and out to refer to some of those like pivot or whip routes sometimes. But yeah, that's not a common route. It's a good way to highlight Hodgins, though, and catch that safety by surprise. But we've seen so many different ways that Smith incorporates misdirection into his offense. And here they're going to do a really tricky thing, which is just run faking. So faking a run to this running back and then throwing back to him on a screen. This is just inherently hard to defend, right? Because imagine you're these linebackers. You're flowing with run action, right? You're reading your keys. At this point, you've cleared the run. You see that this running back does not have the ball. You know it's a play action pass. You know play action passes have been a problem for you all night. So you drop out, right? That's what you do when you see that it's play action, that the running back hasn't gotten the ball. So it's then incredibly hard to recover from this picture, right? To come back to a screen thrown back to that running back. This is just, from in terms of the reaction standpoint, the key standpoint, especially when Oregon State's been using their play action run game so effectively, thinking that this is play action, bailing out to play coverage, and then recovering to come back to defend a screen to the guy that you thought didn't have the ball. It's just a really hard thing to do. So a nice element of misdirection there for Smith. Just a smart play. And they didn't do a ton of that. They don't overdo it with any of these plays, which is another mark in their favor. Okay, let's go to some of these huge Oregon State run plays that started to open up, especially toward the end of this game. So we're going to go to 8:38 now. All right. Here, Oregon State, we've seen a lot of zone runs from them, but they do run some more gap schemes. Here, they're going to run counter. They're going to pull actually both of these linemen. So speaking of this walked out defensive back that we've been talking about, or that kind of like nickel Sam guy, here we don't see 2 over 1. That guy's not blitzing, probably. Let me double check that. Yeah. We don't have that 2 over 1 look that we have seen. So we think that guy's probably sitting wide in coverage here. And that's in fact what he's doing. What I love that Oregon State's doing here is they're against this look with this guy walked out. They're able to do something that counter cannot normally do. So let me show you what I mean by that. So on a counter play, they're running counter towards 2 tight ends, which is an insane amount of blockers to the left of center. That's going to get them 6 blockers to the left of center because they got 4 there, and then they're pulling 2. So first of all, Stanford's never going to have the numbers that they need to get this defended. Now, the question is, why can they run counter here? And that's the thing that I think is really interesting schematically. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Remember, this guy's walked way out. The way that this is going to work from a run fit perspective is that this defensive end, he knows he's got this guy walked out. So he's going to take the B gap in between the guard and the tackle. And then this nickel Sam, or maybe just a straight up Sam, I can't see his number. He's going to be the guy filling the C gap outside of the tackle. Okay, but what Oregon State knows is that if this guy's lined up way out here, they don't need to block him if they're running counter to the left, right? So they're able to get this kind of cheap block on this guy. They're able to run counter when they wouldn't normally be able to. And let me show you what I mean. Okay. So here, this guy, number 69, who's blocking the defensive end, that's their center. That's Oregon State's center, right? So imagine if this linebacker were on the edge, then he would be unblocked if the Beavers pulled the guard and the tackle. Okay, so if this guy were on the line, right, then the center would be able to block the defensive end, but they would have nobody to block that guy when these 2 guys pulled. And for that reason, counter is normally going to be run with an H-back set to this side. And the idea is that you can pull the guard in the H-back and then leave the tackle to block the backside edge defender. But here, the backside edge defender is walked so far out that Oregon State doesn't need a blocker for him. So they can use the center as the only backside run blocker and pull both the guard and the tackle. And that's going to give them just these monster run numbers to the left side of center where they can be 6 on maybe 5. So I thought that was a really, really, really smart way to attack this walked out linebacker because as we're going to see, the numbers here are just overwhelming. Once again, you might not pause over that play too much. It's a good gain. It's more than 10. It's an explosive. But, I think that knowing that this guy's going to be out wide and knowing that means you don't need a blocker for him and then using that knowledge to run counter is just an incredibly smart thing to do. That's kind of a rare kind of play call. And you probably want to audible out of it. If we get that 2 over 1 where it looks like this guy's blitzing, you might want to audible out of this call. But if you've got a good audible package and you see that guy sitting with the safety not in position to roll down, then go crazy, run counter. Really smart play call there. Okay, let's check out the huge gain. The touchdown on this drive isn't that interesting, but there's one more play that is. And it's this one. Okay. I like what Oregon State's doing here. They're kind of, again, taking advantage of Stanford's concern about their run game. So Stanford's playing kind of a quarter's look at their own here. These safeties are only playing at 10 yards. And the reason for that is because counter with a ton of blockers to the boundary too. Yeah, fairly rare because it can create a traffic jam. I know, it's all about knowing when to run it. That's a good point. All right. So here, Stanford's playing a quarters coverage of their own. They've got this pretty aggressive safety technique. The reason for that's because Oregon State's pulled these two, either slot receivers or tight ends. I can't see their numbers here, but they've got these two extra blockers lined up on the wings here. So they've got 7 guys in the box. And so Stanford's got their 7-man box plus 2 safeties who can be defenders 8 and 9. They're probably thinking that they might need those extra defenders to one side or the other to defend all this counter and stuff like that Oregon State can run. So the safeties are playing at 10 yards. They're brought in close to the box because they need to be the extra defenders against these extra blockers that Oregon State has. So some teams will spread to run, but here Oregon State is compressing to run. They're only leaving these receivers out wide, and all that we're doing here is isolating this receiver against this cornerback up here at the top of the screen. I don't even think this is Hodgins. And so if you look at the way that Stanford's playing this, actually I said that this is quarters. It's a quarters alignment, but if you look at what this safety's doing, it looks like they're actually playing cover 2 up here at the top of the screen, which becomes important because that means that this cornerback is going to squat in the flat. Okay, so he's not actually running as a deep sideline defender. He's squatting in the flat as a cover 2 corner. Maybe they're counting on that cornerback playing a role as a force player in the run game or something like that. But anyway, so all that Oregon State's doing here, I mentioned earlier that hole throw that we saw Stanford taking. Here, Oregon State's getting a classic example of that because when this cornerback squats in the flat and when this safety is bailing from an alignment way inside and only at 10 yards, he doesn't have a lot of depth. Okay, that's going to open this hole that we can see kind of right down the sidelines before the safety can get over. Luton's going to do a good job of recognizing that. The wide receiver does a good job of winning out to the sidelines. Big passing play for the Beavers. So I really like this Oregon State passing offense. You don't have to go spread and RPO to be, really innovative and interesting. The other thing that makes this play work is that this receiver's split isn't all that wide. He's only a little bit outside the hash. And so that's going to give him a ton of room to get out to the sidelines. Normally, the defense is fine with that because their main goal is to protect you from getting straight down the sidelines. Like this cornerback wants to force this receiver. If he's going to go wide, he wants to force him to go all the way wide because he knows he's got this safe bailing out over the top, and the more time he can buy for him, the more chance he'll have to make the play. I think in this case, because this guy's starting the play so wide, he's fine having to bubble out and take that extra horizontal movement to get outside. They're kind of using this compressed split to hold everything down inside and then running that guy out to the sidelines. And Stanford's maybe not in the best alignment for taking away this whole shot. This cornerback isn't doing an awful job. But, the safety from that 10-yard alignment, if he'd started this play at 12 or 15, he's got a much better chance at having an angle on this play. But when Oregon State's able to suck those safeties up, he's not starting from a very good position to get deep down the sidelines here against that receiver. Good stuff. Okay, and that set up the touchdown. The touchdown was a boring play, like a short run from the 1 or something. Not boring, like, from the standpoint of Smash Mouth football, but the scheme isn't what's interesting about it. Okay, let's go to Oregon State's final drive at 4:06 in the 4th. Let me scroll to it. I do love breaking down this offense. I used to like breaking down Stanford's offense too, like not on Saturdays, obviously, as a fan, but, back in those 2015, 2016, 2017 years, they had a lot of this same kind of thing because they weren't a huge spread team, obviously. A lot of it was just doing stuff with leverage in the passing game and numbers in the run game. but they've kind of lost that role in the Pac-12. Okay, going down to 406. And the fan part of me is very happy to see that, obviously. Okay, let's check out 406. Okay, once again, Oregon State's facing kind of a cover 2 look. It's a little bit disguised right now, but it's coming. I think it's coming from down here at the bottom of the screen. So what's going to happen is this safety is going to bail out and get over the top. So let's check this out. Yeah, there he goes. Okay, so these safeties are bailing out to cover 2 late. Stanford's showing kind of a single high look, but they're going to bail out of it. So remember that when we're talking about cover 2, the threat is that, oh, actually, it is coming from the top of the screen. Never mind, it's coming from the 2 tight ends up here. Earlier, I mentioned that the 2 tight ends are still potential vertical threats. Here, we're going to see a way you can get these kind of tandem tight ends open downfield in the passing game. So as we said, Stanford's bailing to cover 2, so this safety is dropping out to play a deep half. We're just going to see another kind of hole throw. Here's the cornerback. In this case, Oregon State's using 1 tight end to attack him in the flat and hold him short, and then they're just running their 2nd tight end on a corner out behind him into that hole between the cornerback and the safety. So good play to attack cover 2. Cornerback doesn't do a bad job of recovering here. I'm actually going to talk a ton about cover 2 on my Patreon. I'm going to talk about a scissors concept that Zach Hill ran at Boise and about why Washington and Florida State had very different successes against it. So that play will be up on Patreon soon. But yeah, this is just another way to attack that hole throw. You know, maybe Stanford's playing a little more cover 2 because it's a 1-possession game at this point. They shouldn't be trying to salt the game away. But a little bit more cover 2 here, a little bit more pass oriented, and giving up those hole shots in between the cornerback and the safety. It's just a well-called passing game. All right. That was 401. Let's go to 235. Okay, cool. There might not be a ton here. Okay, yeah, we can talk about this. This is a nice run, obviously, on 2nd and 10. We've talked a lot about this guy blitzing off the edge, and we saw that on the counter play. Oregon State kind of knew that guy wasn't blitzing because they didn't have this 2-over-1 alignment. Here we see the 2-over-1, so we know this guy's coming off the edge. And the way that Oregon State's going to deal with that is just using this H-back to block him. And maybe I even talked about this earlier. I think I might have pulled this play before I wrote the whole live cast. But once again, using the H-back to block that blitzer coming off the edge, that's going to free up the rest of the offensive line to get these double teams, create that flow, just insane flow to the right that we've seen so many times in this game. Nice cut block on the backside here also opens up this cutback lane for the running back. Good 10-yard game for the Beavers. You know, this isn't something that, it's not like they haven't been doing this all game, right? It's just this is the first time they've been able to put together these sustained drives, and they scored on 4 consecutive drives. They had 4 consecutive touchdown drives once they got it figured out. Okay, next up, 218. Just another run play. What was... Okay, here. Just kind of more of the same with these cutbacks. An interesting difference here. He didn't quite get in for the touchdown, but they scored like a play or two later, I think. Okay, so something interesting here. We've seen that Oregon State has been running a lot of outside zone and really just moving this defensive line all the way across the field. Here they're running inside zone. They're running split zone here, I believe. They're running it away from a tight end that's up here at the top. And without all that flow and all that movement, this backside linebacker is actually going to be kind of slow to flow. So he's not racing across as much as he has on some other plays that we've seen, where those massive cutback lanes open. This guy slow plays it a little bit more. He plays the cutback lane a little bit more. But when you do that, instead of flying over the top, when you hang back, then you do make it possible for other offensive linemen to get up and block you. So here, it doesn't much matter what he does. If he'd flown over the top, he would have opened up a massive cutback lane on the backside. Here he stays backside, but that just frees him up to get sealed off and open up a play side cutback lane. This is really one of the big benefits of zone running in general, is that no matter what the defense does or how they react to what you're doing, it's kind of very well set up to adapt and to change on the fly. So even though Oregon State loves those counter plays and power and read plays and stuff like that, the zone play really is their bread and butter, and it's because it sets up plays like this that can kind of attack the defensive front no matter what it does. They were able to run really well in this game on Stanford using this. Backside linebacker plays a little bit slower than he has. That just lets one of those interior linemen cut him off. Okay, and they ran that in not much later. Okay, and then, Stanford, although they had, their offense kept doing what it had been doing in the first half. They just kept scoring at the same pace. Their defense all of a sudden gave up 28 points really fast, but they kind of leaned on their offense to salvage things here at the end after Oregon State gets in for this touchdown. So Stanford's going to go down the field. They're going to kick a field goal to win it. Huge. Right. Oh, and I'm going to look at that kick return. Exactly. Yeah, the kick return almost certainly stopped this from going into overtime. Yeah, I think there's one play that I wanted to talk about from the drive itself, which is more about Oregon State's personnel than it is about Stanford's scheme. Because, yeah, I agree that the kick return really set everything up. So this is the play that we're interested in. I don't talk about special teams too much on here, but this one is worth it. Because this is really the difference. That missed tackle was huge. Okay, so let's go back and check out exactly what's going on here. I do a little bit less with special teams, but without going too much into all the different positions people can play, on both sides of the ball and special teams and all that, you can really think of this a lot in the way that you'd think of a run play where the return team has a certain number of blockers, they create a certain number of gaps, and it's up to the defense in this case, to the kicking team to fill all those gaps and to make sure that there's nowhere for the ball carrier to go. So it's like a run game stretched out over a much larger amount of space. And so on this play, the problem here is just that Oregon State's going to end up with two guys in the same gap, which if you read my stuff on the run game, is a bad thing. So if we look at the overall structure of this kick coverage, here Oregon State's got this guy outside on the edge. He is ultimately going to be the guy that's going to, you can almost think of him as a contained player in a sense. Maybe that's not actually what they're running here. But anyway, here's that outside most guy that we've seen. Okay. And so as we saw, he was the guy who was in the outside most position on this kick coverage team. And so what we're seeing here is that much like a run play, think ISO with a fullback leading through to take out a linebacker. Here is this lead blocker for the ball carrier who's right here. Stanford has one blocker leading through this lane. Oregon State has two coverage guys. They should be able to fit one guy outside of him, one guy inside of him to take away that lane. But ultimately, this guy is going to fall inside. They're going to end up with two guys in the same lane or in the same gap, as it were. Right, so this guy was already playing inside. The guy outside of him jumped down inside as well. And so at this point, they've kind of lost their outside contain. This guy could theoretically get there. He's not blocked. The outside man jumped inside to absorb that block, but he's not maybe in the best position. And so that's ultimately what sets that up. There's a missed tackle there, but so just like with the run game, there's a certain amount of the key to this is a lot of it's just lane discipline. There are plays on kick returns just like there are plays in any other phase of the game. And here we see Oregon State messing up a little bit with their lane discipline. And it cost him a shot at overtime. If you give Stanford the ball at the 25, and if they're smart, they're just going to chuck it up to those big wide receivers and tight ends until they get a touchdown. So maybe Oregon State wouldn't have won anyway, but that play didn't help. There was one more play that I wanted to look at because I agree the rest of the drive kind of stunk. But I think I wanted to look at this first play. Yeah, you can kind of look, and they're kind of trying to kick it to their left, and they're trying to kind of hem him in a little bit there and close the net on him, but they get out of those lanes. Oh, here we go. Yeah, this is so, if the kick return is part of what did this. We saw a play like this earlier, and I was kind of I included that play to set this up. So here again, we're going to see Stanford's going to run that kind of sail route with this slot receiver, this inside receiving threat. And if we look at the way that the nickel back over him is playing, this is another one of those cases where he should probably be able to take this away. It looks like maybe they're spinning to a single high look. So this defender's got outside leverage. He's on the hash. The receiver's taking a mild inside release maybe. He's trying to force into this safety in the middle of the field while he's playing outside to defend anything that breaks back out. But here, once again, he just gets pushed too deep. He gets caught looking at the quarterback a little bit, and that receiver is able to cross his face, destroy his leverage, and get back outside of him. So this is something that's been a problem for Oregon State for both of the last 2 years. Their personnel and development are underperforming their scheme a little bit on the defensive side of the ball. And on this play, maybe Stanford still would have been able to get into field goal range, but this big passing play hurt him almost as much as the long kick return. And it's something that by leverage, the Beavers should have been able to defend. And once again, the route that's called by Stanford here isn't necessarily the thing that's winning this, although the execution matchup between these two players is good. And if you know that that's the case, then you can call this all game. But it's another one where the leverage doesn't really help the receiver at all. Okay, that's all I wanted to say about this play. Stanford goes on to kick a field goal, and they pull off the win. But nice fought game by both teams. A lot of fun talking about Oregon State's offense and seeing some of those wide receivers for Stanford go to work. And that's it. Are there any other questions or comments? I know sometimes we get some bonus plays we want to break down at the end here. I'm happy to do that. Yeah, let's do it. What plays do you have in mind? First quarter, 9:42. Okay, let's do the fourth quarter one first, just because it's closer. Okay, 9:56. Here we go. All right, so 3rd and 6. Oh, don't tell me I'm going to have to scroll through all those commercials. Okay, that was awful. A few too many shots of the farm in those commercials for my liking as well. How do I keep missing it? Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. We finally got it. All right. Let me watch this and just see what's happening. Oh, I remember this play. You're thinking you should have gone up here at the top of the screen probably, right? Let's see what he is thinking here. He's looking left. Yeah. Especially when that cornerback falls down. So he's looking left. He knows that he's got the bracket out here. That's not necessarily a problem because he's got inside breaking routes by both number 1 and number 2. So they're setting up a little horizontal stretch on this nickel back up here, which seems to have worked. Yeah, I guess he's looking out here and he's thinking that this nickel back's going to be able to break on that. That is a long throw. There's a chance that if this nickelback's reading him well, that he would be able to break on it. And they also, I would be worried, if I were Mills, I'd be worried about this nickelback getting to the number 1 receiver here because, presumably he knows how this coverage works from film study and things like that. Stanford's trying to set up this 2-on-1 horizontal stretch up here, but Oregon State is dropping out this other linebacker. So it seems like there's a good chance that this nickelback is an outside defender over the slot here. He should be in a pretty good position to drive on this. I can understand being nervous about making a throw all the way out here from the far hash with that nickelback sitting there. Because the second that Mills commits his shoulders and eyes, that nickelback's going to break on that route, and he could end up throwing an interception. So I think this might be more on the play call. That's kind of my initial read because Oregon State's got this bracketed up like crazy. Is this the one where they're dropping 8? Yeah, it is. Oregon State's just really flooding these underneath zones here. I think this is more on the play call. That's just my take on it, though. I'd be nervous about this guy if I were Mills. And the question is, did he misunderstand the coverage, I guess, because they're rolling down here doing a kind of 3 buzz thing. So this guy is going to end up carrying the seam, as we've talked about with Stanford's defense. Yeah, but he doesn't really chase the seam until Mills' eyes come back to the right. If Mills had a bazooka arm, he'd throw it that way. Well, yeah. He definitely thinks that he can't make that throw. Maybe we would have seen Luton make that throw. There are guys who you might see try to do it, especially, as we talk about what should these receivers be doing. I was kind of assuming that this receiver's route was going to keep breaking back inside toward that nickel back, but especially if this guy's just hitching up, there are definitely quarterbacks in the Pac-12 who'd make that throw. The receiver does seem to be coming inside. I don't know what he's coached to do. But yeah, if this guy runs a hitch, then this might be a sign that Mills either doesn't trust what he's seeing from the coverage or doesn't trust his arm. One of those two definitely seems plausible. And what was the other one? The other one was 9:42 in the first. That's right. Oh, man. The Cal game at Memorial, I forget which year it was, but there was one game where the Ducks absolutely destroyed the Bears in Berkeley, and Herbert was making those long throws. He was throwing outs to the wide side of the field underneath off coverage. That was incredible, and that was like 3 years ago or so. That was a long time ago. It was the one they won in Memorial, not the one that they lost. Yeah, those wide outs. When you get a quarterback who can throw an out to the wide side of the field consistently, that's pretty impressive. I saw Herbert had an encouraging first outing. At least I didn't get to watch the game, but I saw the Twitter blowback. All right, let's check out this play. Oh boy. Yeah. So the question here is, should he have thrown to it doesn't take too much football IQ to suggest that you're thinking maybe he shouldn't have thrown to a tight end 5 yards downfield on 3rd and 17. So let's see what else he could have done. Yeah, throwing to a bracketed tight end 12 yards short of the line to gain on 3rd down is probably not the best read. But what else could he have done? What did his coach give him? Oh, I remember this play now too. Yeah, obviously, well, what could he have done? It's 3rd and 17. None of his receivers are running routes beyond 10 yards. So, on 3rd and 17, part of the problem is 1, 2, 3, and then a flat route, coming from the inside out. Although I guess they're just playing for field goal range, right? So they're not even trying to pick up the first down. Okay, so what could he have done instead? Maybe thrown the out up here and hoped for a few yards after the catch to get a little bit closer for his field goal kicker. We've got this inside guy cutting the slant here. There's probably a cornerback out here on the flat, so I don't think he should have gone to the bottom of the screen. I think he definitely could have gotten a few more yards throwing up here to the top. I don't know how many more yards he could have gotten, maybe 3 or 4, depending on what this cornerback does. But that'd be the easier throw, in fact. That'd be a much easier throw than this, where the guy's really bracketed. And even just by where their routes are right now, he would have gotten more yardage out of it. Yeah. He would have gotten 3 or 4 more, probably. You think so? Yeah, if the cornerback misses, it's good night. I guess it depends on where exactly the ball is and where the wide receiver catches it. But yeah, he could have gotten 3 more yards out of it. Stanford ended up missing this field goal. This is one of the missed field goals? Yeah, it is. Let's see how much he missed by. Yeah, an extra 5 yards might have helped him out a lot. Yeah. Let's see what he probably was thinking about for the coverage there. Yeah, I don't know. Stanford, for how effective their offense was when they were really good, I haven't been incredibly impressed by their quarterback development. Like, obviously, we all know Andrew Luck, but he was kind of getting close to pro ready from the jump, when he got there. They've had a long run of solidly rated quarterback talent that they've recruited, and nobody's really turned into a huge star. The guy it looked like it might be, for a minute it looked like it might be Costello, but now he's playing for Mike Leach in the SEC? Is that what's going on? So, yeah, their quarterback is Tavita Pritchard their quarterback coach as well as their offensive coordinator? So, this does bring me back a little bit. Remember, for those of you who watched the USC live cast, we saw when Michael Pittman was running an out against an off cornerback like this, Slovis was going to throw that 100 times out of 100, just automatically. Definitely could have gotten a little bit more out of that. The safety here might have limited any huge play, but yeah. All right, I'm disconnected. All right. I don't think he's terrible, but I have a hard time believing he pushed out Costello, who's presently beating the national champs. Yes, Pritchard's never cashed a paycheck not signed by... I know. Stanford's promoting, especially on offense, I think they're promoting too much from inside. I just don't like their coaching staff at all. I agree with that 100%. No, they're kind of... Cal fans will remember what it was kind of like at the end of the Tedford years where you're like, he was a good coach. Surely he didn't forget how to coach. He didn't forget how football works. But you can just get stuck in this rut, where you're just not, you don't have the people coming in who can give you that fresh look. Want to know if OSU and Stanford are going in opposite directions. Interesting. We need to see where Oregon State's ceiling is, I think. Yeah, that's a pretty solid cushion. The easiest thing in the world is to take a bad team and get to 6 or 7 wins, I think. I love what Smith's doing. I think that the play calling is great. Every year it always gets harder no matter who you are to keep that up, just as people get tape on you and problems pop up and coaches leave and things like that. I don't know if Oregon State is going to get up to the place where Stanford has been yet. I think their defense is kind of a problem for them at the moment, and I don't see that necessarily changing anytime soon. I like their offense a lot. I don't know if they can get beyond that 6 or 7 win points consistently. What was their record in 2019? Because, they still have some room where you'd expect them to climb. They were 5-7. I'm not 100% convinced, especially with their defense, that they're going to be a 9 or 10 win team. So that wasn't the easiest situation, but you see turnarounds like that, I think for you to have a 2-win team, so I put a lot more onus on coaching than on, for example, talent or other things like that. And so I think that when you can't have a 2-win team without a lot of schematic problems. And so if you're a new coach and you can come in and clean up the scheme side of it and then maybe do a little bit motivationally, I do think getting from being a 2-win team, which means you're basically beating a couple of 1-2A teams in the preseason, getting from being a 2-win team to squeaking out a couple of wins against other cellar dwellers in the conference, I think that that's the kind of thing that you can do pretty quickly as a coach just through not having awful X's and O's. So that would kind of be my argument. Oftentimes just being a different coach is good for a few wins. You see, and I'm thinking about like Rick Neuheisel or something, where you feel this momentum as you see a team that seems to be more exciting and more motivated and things like that, but then it just never really goes anywhere. Sometimes just being a new coaching staff. And so what does that say about ASU? Missed a ball on a last-second field goal in this game. What do you mean, what's that say about it? In what way with regard to Arizona State? And by the way, like I don't mean to say that Jonathan Smith is like Rick Neuheisel or like Sonny Dykes, who was another coach who came in and had a real awful season. Showing the oh, okay, yeah, well, so no, I mean game to game it can happen. As I say, like qualitatively, I really like their scheme on offense. Is Herm just another coach who cleaned up mistakes? Interesting question, because he kept Rob Likens as coordinator. I haven't watched as much Arizona State as I would have liked to. And now they've got completely different coordinators. I'd need to look at their personnel as well to see like who graduated the year before Herm's first year and who came in. I don't really know enough about Arizona State to be able to talk on that too much. I mean, but I don't want to sell Smith short because there's a lot of really good scheme there going on offensively. I think that their defense is not really going in the same direction. And easiest thing in the world doesn't necessarily mean that like I'm not impressed by Smith's scheme or his offense or like the development that they've gotten on the offensive line, for example, the way they developed Luton, the way they found ways to use Hodgins. Like those are all things that are like objectively good, as we've talked about a ton in here. But there is a difference between going from 2 wins to 5 wins and going from 5 wins to 8 or 9 wins. I think that those are qualitative. The latter of those tasks is a lot more difficult. So that's kind of my thought process on that. But you're really high on Smith. You think he's going to take him up to competing in the Pac-12 North? Were there any games that they just barely won? Let's take a look at this schedule. I'm always leery of the they could have won 2 more games argument because as a Cal fan, Cal fans are often in the situation where we're saying we easily could have won 2 more games. Next year we'll win 2 more games. With this game, Wazoo and Hawaii all decided by 3 points or fewer. Let's take a look at their wins. Yeah, I mean, they also had the 21-17 game at Cal where Cal had their backup quarterback in. That's probably a loss if Garbers is playing. They had a 1-point win against Arizona State. Yeah, so, you know, they easily could have won 2 more games, but they also could have easily lost 2 more games, you know? I think when you got that many close games on both sides, your record's probably about what it says it should be. I mean, if you're playing for, 5 or 6 games that are within a score, you'd probably expect to, you might think that you'd win about half of them and lose about half of them. So even though they might have pulled off any individual game, they easily could have also lost another one. I mean, I agree. I think that the Cal game, they could, if Garbers isn't hurt, they're probably 4-8. So what do you think about the argument that it's easier to go from a 2-win team to a 6-win team than from a 6-win team to a 9-win team? And that's always kind of been my impression. The as you go higher, every new team that you need to knock off is a little bit harder. Smith's also got that recruiting hurdle to deal with. Yeah, exactly. The talent ceiling's an issue. And once again, I mean, they need to hire a really good defensive coordinator in order to do the same kinds of things on that side of the ball that they're doing on offense. Yeah, he could be kind of another Mike Riley back when he had that kind of good run. I mean, the offenses are similar in a lot of ways in terms of like the misdirection element and like We'll see. Yeah, I could see that. Oh yeah, he's got that kind of. Who? What am I thinking of? Who was Oregon State's coach when Smith was the quarterback there? Was it Riley by that point? UW at Stanford next week. Is that the most interesting game? I like doing the same team in back-to-back weeks. I think that's fun from an analytical standpoint. And I'm very interested in Washington. Yeah, maybe the Beavers could hire Andy Boo. Let's see. Yeah, I like that. I'll take a look at it and see what I've got. If there are some other things that factor in sometimes too, but I like the idea of Washington and Stanford. Let me check out that schedule and see what other games might possibly be interesting. Also bouncing a little bit about what I've already done on my Patreon. No, I don't think the Cal Oregon game would be very interesting to too many people. What do we have? Stanford, Oregon State. Okay, what's up for next week? No, I don't think I want to do Cal, Oregon. Stanford, Washington would be interesting. I don't want to do Arizona and Colorado since Colorado's got an entirely new coaching staff. And I don't. Yeah, I think Stanford and Washington's definitely the most entertaining and most interesting one on the table. Yeah, no, I don't think that Oregon State UCLA game's the one to do. Yeah, no, I'm not going to do Arizona and Colorado. Yeah, I think Stanford and Washington's a pretty clear choice. So yeah, we'll do that one for sure next week. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks everybody for stopping by. It's always fun. Check back next week. We'll do Washington versus Stanford and see how Stanford pulled off that upset. I am, of course, happy to hang around and chat a little bit more if anyone's got anything else. But the breakdown's over. Yeah, for sure. All right, everybody, I'll see you all later. I'm going to stop the broadcast now, but you can always check out the replay if there were any parts that you missed. And be on the lookout on my Patreon for other kinds of stuff and on my Twitter for announcements about next week's